Felly gael croesawu pawb wan i'r cyngor sir Mawrth y 3 o'r 2021 am 10 y bore. Da ni dipyn bach yn ddiweddar yn cychwyn, ond da ni wedi cael problemau technegol y bore yma, felly da ni ymddiheuro am hynny. Awn ni ymlaen felly i ymddiheuriadau, a mae yna rei wedi dod i law, Cynghorydd Geraint Williams, Richard Menon a Gwyneth Censler. Os yna rhywun arall?
A Bonap Gwynfor.
Diolch yn fawr.
Steve Gadd is in another meeting, but he will join us for the finance items later on. He'll come out of the meeting he's in.
Diolch yn fawr, Julian. Neb arall? Dyna fo, allwn ni yrru ymlaen. Datgan diddordeb, gai ofyn i Gary Williams yn goleuo ni eto. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interests in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interests should be declared now, or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete a declaration of interest form, which is available from Democratic Services.
So rwy'n eisiau datgan diddordeb neu am wneud nes ymlaen os fydd yna rhywbeth da chi'n teimlo eich calon eisiau gwneud? Na, dyna fo. Sorry.
Meirig, yn anffodus mae gennau soffa yn cyrraedd a maen nhw newydd ffonio maen nhw'n dod lawr y ffordd. So ddau'n allan am chwarter awr ddau'n ôl wedyn.
Diolch yn fawr, Eryl.
Sorry.
Awn ni ymlaen i rhif 3, sef materion o frys. Mae gynnon ni 2 gwestiwn, os ydy Arwel yna, eisiau gofyn i gwestiwn?
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Dwi wedi bod yn poeni fel pencampwr anableddau am y newidiadau i'r gwasanaeth i bobl sydd yn byw gyda namgolwg a chliw yn ein sir. Yn y diwedd, mi gefais ateb gan swyddog dydd Gwener diwetha. Felly ni fyddaf yn gofyn y cwestiwn ac yn anfon yr atebion a gefais at bob cynghorydd yn sicr yn awr. Mae grŵp Plaid Cymru yn gobeithio y bydd y gwasanaeth a gynigir yn y dyfodol i drigolion y sir sydd yn byw gyda namgolwg a chliw yn gwella. Diolch yn fawr i chi.
Diolch yn fawr, da chi yn gryno iawn. Diolch yn fawr chi, Cynghorydd Arwel Roberts. Felly, awn ni ymlaen i'r cynghorydd Glenn Swingler. Glenn, da chi yna?
Yes, good morning everybody. DCC support many centres providing work opportunities for people with learning disabilities. At the moment, they are rightly closed due to COVID. So my question is as follows. When the easing of restrictions allow, will all the facilities that provide work and training opportunities for people with learning difficulties be reopening just as before? Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Glenn. Dwi'n credu mae Cynghorydd Bobby Phillips yn ymateb. Bobby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Iawn.
Yeah, good. Well, as you may remember, a review of internal work ops services was carried out in 2019-20, and the actions were being implemented during 2020 as we went into the first lockdown. Although services have been closed, we have continued to work towards the recommendations within the review. As well as this, we need to consider COVID and ongoing requirements to ensure any services are delivered safely in the future. Therefore, it is unlikely that services will be exactly the same as they were before. However, we remain committed to delivering against the review and ensuring the users of these services access high quality support in the future. Any necessary changes will be consulted with people who use the service and their families to ensure individuals' agreed outcomes can be met at least as well as before. In terms of the contracted out learning difficulties day services, co-options have remained open, but for a very limited number of people. Attendance is decided on a case-by-case basis, subject to risk assessments, etc. And currently, only individuals where it has been assessed as essential for their mental well-being are attending. Similar for the Glyndŵr Centre, when easing of restrictions allows, both centres will probably go back to operating in a similar way to how they were prior to the pre-Christmas lockdown. Numbers have been reduced to comply with risk assessments, and due to the changes made within the different establishments to comply with COVID guidance and ensure space for social distancing. It goes without saying that if any major issues or major changes to the services, they would, as always, be taken through scrutiny and cabinet as appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Iawn, Bobby. Diolch yn fawr. Ga I ofyn, felly, ydy Cynghorydd Glen Swingler eisiau gofyn cwestiwn ychwanegol?
Just very quickly, please. Yeah. So out of the existing ones that are presently closed and would have been reopened, try and think of an example. So Mayvod Wood, for example, if we were to come out of lockdown imminently, or if it were to happen in April or May, are these other facilities up and ready to go straight away? Thank you.
Diolch, Bobby.
Yes, well, as I said, Glenn, we were sort of halfway through reorganising. So some are pretty up and ready to go, like in County Hall. Some have already taken place, like the garden opportunities in Rhyl, and some are not quite ready to go. So hopefully by the, within the next few months, they'll all be sorted and ready. And I can send you out where we've gone to so far, if you like. I mean, I don't want to read it all out because it's a page full, but I could certainly send it to you if you'd like, Glenn.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Bobby.
Diolch yn fawr chi'ch dau. Diolch yn fawr am hynny. Rhif 4 felly, ac mae'r cofnodion wedi'w anfon neithiwr neu ddoe, ac mae'n fod gynnach chi erbyn hyn ar y cyfrifiadur. Does na ddim tudalennau arnyn nhw, felly na i gymryd y dudalen gyntaf, 1 i 3 am gywirdeb. Tros y dudalen, does na ddim rhifau, yr un sef rhif 3 sy'n codi, ac wedyn ar y trydydd tudalen, rhif 3 sydd yn cael ei ateb. A wedyn, da ni'n troi i tudalen 4, a mae'n gorffen 3, a mae 4 a 5 wedi cychwyn. Troi droso wedyn, da ni'n dal ar 5, ar tudalen 5. Troso wedyn i tudalen 6, a mae hwnna hefyd yn delio hefo 5. Tros o dudalen i 7, a da ni'n dal yn 5, a wedyn 6. Tros o dudalen i 8, a rhif 7, cyflog byw. Dros y dudalen eto, yn yr un pennawd 7, oes na rhywun? Na, rhif 9. A wedyn ar y dudalen ola, rhif 10, mae rhybydd o gynnig 8 a 9 rhaglen gwaith y dyfodol. Awn ni nôl, os yna rhywbeth yn codi ar y dudalen gyntaf, 1 i 3. Unrhyw beth ar yr ail dudalen neu'r trydydd dudalen. Trosodd eto i'r rhif 4, y cofnodion, rhif 4, 5 y gyllideb. Eto trosodd, tudalen 5 a 6, rhif 7, tudalen 7. Rhan 6, cynllun gostyngiadau treth y cyngor, na. Trosodd eto, tudalen 8, rhif 7, cyflog byw gwirioneddol. Rhyn un pennawd wedyn i'r dudalen nesaf, rhif 9, a dudalen ola, rhif 10, 8 a 9. So rhywun yn cynnig bod nhw'n gywir?
I'll do that.
I'd like to propose that, Chair. Alan James, Vice Chair.
Alan James yn
I'll
ni.
check.
Dyna ni. Diolch yn
Chair,
fawr.
Chair, I'm very sorry. I did have my hand up, I thought, but it obviously not been recognised or been seen. It matters arising on page 8, actually, about the storms, Christopher, and talk about involvement with NRW and those kind of people. I'm just wondering if there's any update on that. We were waiting for a report from NRW on the storms back in February 2020. We were promised it for this month. It's still not come out. I wonder if anyone's got any updates. That's all, Chair, please. Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah, I can come in there, Chair, if you can hear me. Brian Jones.
Oh, yeah. Brian.
Brian.
Morning, yeah. I've got a shocking connection this morning, so if I drop out, that'll be the reason why. But as by way of an update, there has been a communication yesterday from Natural Resources Wales on the flood reports from last February. They will be available in the next 2 weeks, something like that. So yes, it is delayed, but they will be with us fairly shortly. And that'll obviously include Councillor Peter Scott's area in St Asaph. I believe Graham Bowes might come in as well, because there is a little bit of detail that he might want to add on about St Asaph. A quick comment from me in regards of Rhythin. At the last council meeting, I made a statement which you just okayed off, about to okay off in the minutes. And in respect of Rhythin, Natural Resources Wales have done some interim work there on where the river breached the banks. And that's good that that's happened. It started last week, it's ongoing this week. And I believe there's a commitment from Natural Resources Wales in that area of Rhythin where they unfortunately had the floods, that there will be a permanent solution put into the defences sometime round about the autumn. If I can ask Graham Bowes, he might just want to add a little bit onto that. Graham?
Graham, da chi eisiau dod I mewn?
Bore da.
Bore da, Graham.
Oh, bore da. No, nothing to add to that. Just that officers are in regular dialogue with Natural Resources Wales, who are the responsible authority for the flood defences on the river in Rhythin. So we're working in partnership with them, and we're doing all we can to keep the local members updated. And indeed, there's a local residents group that we're keeping updated as well. Thank you, Chair.
Di hynna'n iawn, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
No, diolch I chi. Os yw rhywun arall wedi gweld rhywbeth a ddim wedi cael cyfle? Nag oes, na ni, ymlaen â ni I rhif 5 felly. A dyma ni Brian sydd yn cyflwyno, dwi'n meddwl. Eto. Rhif 5, Brian. Or is it Heidi?
Yeah, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, just about, yeah. Gwrwch ymlaen.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll apologise. I thought Councillor Arwel Roberts, as the chair of the performance scrutiny, was presenting this report.
Iawn, ofyn I Arwel. Arwel, y ti sy'n cyflwyno?
Ia, da chi'n iawn. Diolch I Brian am roi lle I mi. Diolch yn fawr iddo fo. Dyna, y fi sydd wrthi tro yma. Ia. Wel, mae'r adroddiad ger eich bron ynghylch OSGOI a lleihau plastig yn swyddfeydd Cyngor Sir Ddinbych. Ar yr ail ar 20 o Ragfyr llynedd, ychydig cyn y Dolig, cafwyd y pwyllgor arbennig o pwyllgor craffu perfformiad a cefnogwyd yr argymhellion. Mae'r adroddiad yn ystyried sut y gall y Cyngor leihau ei defnydd o blastig gan y grŵp tasg a gorffen, dan gaderyddiaeth y cynghorydd Emrys Wyn o Rhythin. A hefyd hoffwn ddiolch i'r swyddog cynllunio strategol a pherfformiad Mrs Heidi Baden-Price am ei gwaith o lunio yr adroddiad. Mi welwch fod yna ddau gymal. Gyntaf, cydnabod gwaith y grŵp tasg a gorffen ar ran llwyddiannau. Cam 1, hynny yw osgoi a lleihau defnyddio plastigau un tro mewn swyddfeydd dinesig. Ac yn ail, galluoli'r aelodau I graffu ar y cynlluniau a gynigir fel ffordd ymlaen o ran cam 2 a dyfodol y grŵp. Mae fraint yna nawr os gai, Mr Cadeirydd, I alw ar y cynghorydd ymryswyn I ddweud gair, achos bod o wedi bod yn nghlwm ar gwaith yma ers y dechrau pan ddaru o ddod ar y cyngor. Os gai, Mr Cadeirydd, diolch yn fawr.
Mae enw o lawd, sy'n wedi edrych ar ym mhys i'n papur. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch ymlaen, Cynghorydd Emrys Wyn. Atod yr meicroffon. Yna ni.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Diolch Arwel. Bore da bawb. Gai hefyd yr gwerthfawrogiad mae Arwel eisoes wedi cyfeirio at Heidi am ei gwaith caled yn yr adroddiad at ei gilydd. A hefyd i'r pwyllgor tasg a gorffen am y cyfraniadau mae pob un wedi wneud tuag at gallu cwblhau y rhan cyntaf y dasg, sef lleihau y defnydd o blastig un defnydd o fewn swyddfeydd y sir. Da ni wedi llwyddo I wneud hynny, mae'n falch iawn gen I allu cyhoeddi hynny, mae hynny wedi bod yn llwyddiant. Da ni'n gallu gweld tystiolaeth ono fe ers yn agos I flwyddyn, gan yn bod ni ddim yn gallu cyfarfod yn y swyddfeydd, ond pan fyddwn ni yn mynd yn ôl, byddwn ni gobeithio yn gweld ar llygad yn hynny y gwahaniaethau, y newidiadau sydd wedi bod yn y cyfleusterau at sy'n yn cyfer ni fel cynghorwyr, ond mae hefyd newidiadau sy'n o'r golwg yn y swyddfeydd hefyd wedi digwydd. Yr ail dasg, wrth gwrs, oedd mynd i'r afel a defnydd o blastig un defnydd yn y gwasanaethau arlwyo ysgolion. Oedd hwnna'n llawer mwy heriol na'r dasg gyntaf, rhaid cydnabod hynny hefyd, ac mi roedden ni'n ymwybodol iawn ar ôl cael caniatâd yr cyngor I gario ymlaen am y flwyddyn ychwanegol efo hynny. Roedden ni'n ymwybodol y bydde fo'n heriol yn o'i hun, ond da ni wedi gorfod yn anffodus oherwydd y cyfyngiadau wedi gorfod aros yn y hunfan efo hwnnw, achos yn wir mae'n debyg yn ystod yr cyfnod argyfyngus hyn, mae'r defnydd o blastig un defnydd wedi yn sicr wedi aros fel mae o fewn arlwyaeth ysgol, os nad wedi cynyddu, a mae hynny yn wybodaeth cyhoeddus, achos mae'r diogelwch sydd yn nghlwm a gweini, bwyd ag ati wedi ychwanegu iddo oherwydd Covid-19 hefyd. Ac da ni wedi deud erioed, da ni ddim yn gwrthwynebus I blastig, mae'n le iddo fo yn y man cywir, a mae rhaid I ni gydnabod ar hyn o bryd, pan mae'n argyfyngau fel hyn yn codi, mae'r plastig yn dod i'w defnyddio, mae plastig yn dod i'w, mae cryfder plastig yn dod i'r amlwg wedyn, cos mae yn hawdd iawn i'w gadw'n lan yn ôl yr angen. A dyna pam, er enghraifft, da ni'n caniatáu I defnydd un plastig yn defnydd o fewn bywyd meddygol a gofal cymdeithasol hefyd. A tasg a gorffen, grŵp gorffen, wedi dirwyn I ben. Dwi'n licio meddwl mai dros dro, achos oedd yna bosib ail lafel yn y dyfodol gyda o fewn adrannau eraill efo yn y cyngor wrach, lle fedrwn ni fynd i'r afel ar broblem arlwyaeth yn yr ysgolion. A tu hwnt I hynny hefyd yn gwasanaethau ni'n hunain efo Ddinbych leisure. Fe'n ei dawelu fanne, a dwi'n gwybod bod yna fwy o drafodaethau wneud yn rhywbeth dyfodol monitro hyn yn y blynyddoedd nesaf. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch I chi'ch dau am y cyflwyniad campus. Rwy'n efo cwestiwn iddyn nhw? Neu da chi am fynd i'r argymhellion sydd ar yr ail tudalen, sef tudalen 8, eitem 3. Ia?
Thank you, Matthew.
Glenn eisiau dod I mewn, mae'n ddrwg gna I.
I can't see anybody for a minute.
Glenn, da chi eisiau dod I mewn?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yes, please, diolch yn fawr. It would be an interesting to see with the county buildings having been closed for the last few months, and also a lot of the schools being shut. How much plastic waste has been how much plastic has not been used in that time? What have we saved in terms of plastic, single-use plastic waste over that time? I don't know if that's something that somebody would be able to do, just to give us an idea. Iawn, nawn ni feddwl dros y cwestiwn yna funud. O Brian...
Ie, di'r ateb ddim ar gael gen I, ac dwi'n meddwl bod hwnna yn ateb oddi wrth y swyddogion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, thank you, Chair. I haven't got the scientific answer on Councillor Swindler's question there, but as an overall comment, the amount of waste that we've been generating as an authority during COVID has increased, and it's increased significantly. So by way of that comment, I would assume that the single-use plastic will have increased as well. But as you've said, Chair, you would need to ask officers to come up with the factual figures on that. I did have my hand raised. All I wanted to say to Councillor Emrys Wynne, the chair of the DATGAN Plastic Finish Group, is that as the lead member, if he feels the need, the door is always open in the last 12 months of this council, if he would like to come and discuss with me any issues around single-use plastic, which we can take forward to officers and beyond. So I'd just like to put that on the record this morning here. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch fawr iawn, Brian. Rwy'n arall? O, Bobby, Cynghorydd Bobby Feely, diolch i mewn.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Similar to Glenn, presumably the plastics group has, I notice, you know, the reduction in plastics and so on relates to DLL. Perhaps I should declare an interest, Gary, if you're listening, sorry. Declare an interest.
I'm always listening.
I presume this has been thoroughly discussed with Jamie Groves, the Managing Director of DLL, as he's mentioned in dispatches there.
Now, Gary, shall matter?
Yeah, sorry, Bobby, I've not been involved in the work itself, but just in terms of the interest issue, yes, it's a personal interest only because you're appointed to the board of the company by the council and therefore you're exempted from having any form of prejudicial interest.
Iawn, Bobby?
Yes, I'm not in the plastics industry.
Iawn, rwy'n arall? No? Wel, so os yna neb arall, ga I ofyn i un o'na chi gyflwyno yr argymhellion sydd ar y dudalen 8, rhif 3, pwy sy'n am I cyflwyno nhw? Arwel, wyt ti am I cyflwyno nhw?
Dwi wedi darllen nhw'n gynt, ydw i'n ei cyflwyno nhw eto. Cynabod gwaith y grŵp.
Os nei di cyflwyno nhw, os wyt ti wedi darllen nhw, maen nhw'n yn dydi i'w gweld beth bynnag. Os nei di gynnig, os wyt ti eisiau?
Dwi'n cynnig fod chi'n derbyn yr argymhellion. Diolch.
Dyna fo, os na eilydd? Eilydd?
Excuse me, did somebody answer my question? Only I didn't hear it, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Pwy sy'n ateb?
Did somebody answer my question? I'm struggling to hear. It's a bit broken.
Os na rwy'n yn barod I ymateb I Cynghorydd Bobby Feely?
Chair, Graham Bowers here, if it helps.
Yeah.
Iawn, come in.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Feely's asked a question around DLL and the potential for looking at how the company can reduce plastic in the future. Some discussions have taken place with the company, and the company's response was very similar to that of the school catering, in as much as now in the pandemic is not the time to do that for a number of reasons, different pressures as a result of the pandemic, different ways of operating as a result of the pandemic, a lot of facilities currently closed, etc. So it's a possibility for the future. The company has a contract with the council has a contract with the company in the way that our relationship is. So it would need to go through those formal routes and there'd be a formal dialogue with the company as to when and if they are ready and would like that work to be done in terms of reducing the plastic. So it's not off the table, but there has been discussions with Jamie Groves and the company, and the decision was please not at this moment in time. The time is not currently right, and I think that's probably fair enough. So it's something that will be picked up in the future once we've got over this pandemic, and then there'll be a formal route in which to have that dialogue. Does that help, Councillor Feely?
Thank you, Graham. In the light of that, and I'll ask Gary's advice, should we slightly alter the recommendation to reflect that?
Gary.
I'm not sure that the recommendation necessarily needs to be amended. I'm assuming that it's the second recommendation that you're referring to, and it does say that that any work on the avoidance and reduction of plastics in the council, including alternative delivery models, be coordinated under the climate and ecological change strategy. I think that's fine because, of course, when it says that that would be coordinated under the climate and ecological change strategy, we've got structures in place for us to discuss issues with the company. So we've got our regular contract management meetings, but we've also got the Strategic Governance Board, which is a forum where the company and the council can discuss the ways in which the company is meeting the aspirations of the council, etc. So I don't think the recommendation as such needs to be changed because it doesn't commit to anything other than to working towards. And I think that under the auspices of the Strategic Governance Board, there's a clear communication channel with the company to do what's best for both parties.
Okay, thanks. I was just being super cautious.
All right, Bobby. Iawn?
Yeah, okay, thanks. I was just, you know, thought it was worth flagging up.
Yeah, dwi'n meddwl bod Cynghorydd Brian Jones eisiau dod I mewn. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. No, I dropped my hand.
You've dropped it, dyna fo. Felly, da ni wedi dechrau ar yr argymhellion a mae Arwel wedi i'w darllen nhw ac wedi cynnig holi am eilydd oeddwn ni'n de. Emrys oedd yn codi llaw? Dyna fo. Felly mae yna gynigydd ac eilydd. Di pawb yn weld ac yn derbyn hif 3 yr argymhellion ar yr adroddiad yna. Newch chi ddangos un te, dyna fo, neu hefo. So rwy'n yn erbyn sy'n mwy yn hawsach weithiau. Diolch yn fawr. Unrhyw un yn erbyn i ddangos. Na. Rwy'n yn ymatal. Oes rwy'n yn ymatal?
Ia. Dwi ddim wedi cymryd rhan yn y sgwrs yma I gyd, felly fi dangos abstain o hwn.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Popeth yn iawn, diolch I chi. Emrys,
Ia, jyst mater o drefn, di sylwi ar y sgrin I rwan, dwi'n mynd gweld wyneb pawb bresennol yr aelodau. Sut mae modd cofnodi pleidlais os nad ydyn ni'n gweld I dwylo nhw'n codi? Cos dwi'n mynd gweld trefn electronaidd I fedru dangos cefnogaeth neu diffyg cefnogaeth. Mater o drefn ydy hyn.
Diolch yn fawr. Gary?
Wel, y drefn ydy, fel da ni yn rhan fwyaf o'r cyfarfodydd, mewn haws, really, I ofyn os mae rhywun yn erbyn. Geith unrhyw un sydd yn erbyn ddeud fod nhw'n erbyn. Mae'n hollol addas I un o'r cynghorwyr siarad allan I ddeud fod nhw'n erbyn neu fod nhw'n ymatal, fel mae cynghorydd Ann Davies just I wneud. So, dwi'n meddwl o leia ar y sgrin dwi'n weld o leia hanner o'r cyngor sydd wedi codi law. A dwi'n meddwl os mae cadeirydd yn ofyn os mae unrhyw un yn erbyn, mae hynny yn ddigon dda, dwi'n meddwl. Os mae aelodau eisiau ofyn am bleidlais I gael ei gofnodi, mae'n bosib, ond dwi'n mynd siŵr ar mater fel yma. Mae fyny aelodau, ond dwi'n meddwl fod y cadeirydd yn hollol iawn yn y drefn mae wedi gymryd bore yma.
Diolch yn fawr. Yn sicr, do'n ni'n bwriadu ame gweithredoedd y cadeirydd. Gwbl ochr technegol oedd y gwbl. Dyn ni'n cymryd yn ganiataol, felly os nad oes na ymateb i'r cwestiwn bod nhw'n cyd-fynd ar hyn sydd yn cael i'w feidleisio arno, ie?
Ia.
Dwi'n meddwl, unwaith mae'n cael ei gynnig
a eilio.
Os mae'n neb yn erbyn, mae'n hollol iawn I ni ymlaen.
Iawn, fawr I ti ac mae hwnna wedi erbyn, a diolch hefyd I Heidi Barton Price am ei gwaith hi ynglyn ag o ynde. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd am hynny. Os awn ni droi I rhif 6. O, sori, be o gyn Glenn? Wel, da ni wedi mynd, mae wedi cael ei dderbyn.
So yeah, I wanted to come in at that point in between the two different sections here. I attend many Zoom meetings where we are able to vote electronically. I was just wondering why County Council doesn't have that facility.
Iawn, awn ni ofyn.
I'm advised we don't have a votes facility at the moment on the system that we've got.
Iawn, Glenn? Diolch yn fawr. Awn ni ymlaen efo 6 felly, Helen fo'n ifans. Mae gennym ni Brian sy'n cychwyn efo hwn. Dwi'n iawn, Brian, tro yma?
That's correct, Chair. I will introduce this, and just as an observation, I haven't got my camera on. I'm not being disrespectful. I don't want to lose connection halfway through. So,
drosodd yn well heb y llun.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah. So, next item on the agenda then is Denbighshire County Council's Climate and Ecological Change Strategy 2021 through to 2029. With me this morning, you've already mentioned a name, Helen Vaughan-Evans. She's been the lead officer, and also saying a few words before we get into the debate will be Councillor Tony Thomas, who's the lead member for biodiversity, and I believe they're both eager to speak, Chair, this morning. So this report this morning, it's been through the democratic process. We're looking to rubber stamp it this morning. I believe this is a milestone moment for the county on what we're doing with a climate change strategy. It's putting in a foundation that will go beyond this council and obviously into the next council and all the way through to 2030. And we will look back to this day as the day when hopefully we're going to rubber stamp the strategy and move forward. I won't steal the thunder of my colleagues that are going to follow me shortly, but just a couple of relevant points. You will note in the report that the county as an authority have committed to £9 million investment over the next 3 financial years to support the projects that are in the report. That is a significant amount of commitment in the climate that we're in. It's needed, and we need to do it because I think we all fully understand the importance of tackling climate change. And I think that we're moving into a new era now, coming out of COVID, where we'll see an even bigger push to fall in line with climate change and everything that we can do locally and what's happening UK-wise and globally to ensure that we ultimately save the planet. So it's exciting times, but I suppose we need that element of caution on the funding that we don't overstretch here in Denbighshire. So it is a significant moment. I hope you agree with that, but we're hopefully going to rubber stamp this strategy this morning. There's 1 or 2 other things that I wanted to mention before we move on. I think it's important to stress the point that within the document, there is the governance arrangements to keep in touch, to track look at the key performance indicators on how this strategy is progressing through to 2029. I know we won't all be here in 2029, but I wanted to make the point that the governance arrangements and the mechanisms are in this report, and that's a very important thing that should have been included and is in fact is included. So that is enough from me. So I'll now hand over to Councillor Tony Thomas, who will do a brief introduction on his biodiversity portfolio, and then Helen Vaughan-Evans will come in after Tony. Thank you, Chair.
Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yeah, for instance, our tree planting programme is going very well. The question of tree to do that. We now have a full-time tree officer.
Tony, diffodd y camera.
Okay.
Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me better now, Chair?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I was saying the tree planting programme is going well. We're trying to put the right tree in the right place, more so than the volume. We now have a full-time tree officer, and we've taken on a further 2 officers for 12 months. The addition of our moorlands officer, funded 50% by DCC and 50% by NRW, is already showing good progress. One of our main problems, though, is the ash dieback situation, which is going to be very expensive for all in the UK. Conway, for instance, is predicting it's going to cost them 23 million, 6 million for the council and 17 million for private landlords. Our proposed tree nursery could well be the COVID vaccination equivalent for trees going forward. Denbighshire Countryside Services have always looked after our wildlife and recently acquired land at Llangollen and the Prestatyn wetlands, which gives us further opportunities to continue this great work. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and we've got plenty of opportunities to progress this year. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Tony. Helen, da chi yna?
Diolch, Chair. Diolch, Tony and Brian. Bore da pawb. Diolch am hynny amser bore yma. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time this morning. In March this year, Welsh Government will bring into law a target for Wales to reach net carbon zero by 2050, upping the existing target of 95% reduction. This follows the Committee of Climate Change advice, which tells us all that to meet 2050 targets, we must front-load the effort, deliver the policy change and actions to lock in carbon reduction and increased carbon absorption between now and 2030, as well as act on nature's decline. That is so we keep on track to cap global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and therefore limit the impact already being felt from changes in our climate and loss of biodiversity. Recognising the urgency and also the goals set up by Welsh Government for the public sector in Wales to reach net carbon zero by 2030, every member of this council voted to declare a climate change and ecological emergency in July 2019. For the council to commit to achieving net carbon zero by 2030, to improve biodiversity across Denbighshire, and to draw up a clear plan in order to do so. The Denbighshire County Council Climate and Ecological Change Strategy presented to you this morning for adoption is that clear plan. It represents the council's contribution to tackling the climate and nature crisis to help Wales meet its net carbon zero ambitions and deliver on our statutory duty to biodiversity. The strategy is a culmination of a year's worth of effort of officers across the council working collaboratively and with members of the public to set the course for the council to achieve net carbon zero and ecologically positive by 2030. The strategy provides the vision for 2030 and also a route map to get us there, banking the benefit of reduced carbon, increased carbon absorption and improved species richness, but also banking the co-benefits in economy, health and well-being. This morning, we are asking Council to approve to adopt Denbighshire County Council's Climate and Ecological Change Strategy 2021-22 to 2029-30, recommendation 3.1 of the report, following approval at Cabinet on the 16th of February. Diolch, thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Chair, could I come back in, please, very quickly?
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah, it was very remiss of me in my introduction not to acknowledge once again, and I have done it on numerous occasions, but I'd like to do it again this morning, to thank Helen Vaughan-Evans and her team for the work that she's done with her colleagues over the 18 months or so since she came into post. It's been a sterling effort. It's been recognised regionally as well. And Diane, Helen, Diane.
Diolch Brian, a gaina ategu y diolch Helen a'r criw. Diolch yn fawr chi, mae'r gwaith yn gynhwysfawr iawn ac yn hynod o ddiddorol. A dwi wedi bod yn cadw llygad ar y gwaith wrth o fynd drwy'r gwahanol bwyllgorau ac wedi gwrando'n ofalus arnoch chi yma. Da chi wedi i gyd wedi gwneud gwaith campus. Diolch yn fawr i chi am hynny. Mae gennym ni 5 o gynghorwydd eisiau gofyn cwestiynau. Gai gychwyn efo cynghorydd Graham Timms, Llangollen. Diolch yn fawr. Graham?
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. I've switched my camera off so that I don't get interrupted by technical problems. But first of all, can I say that it seems amazing that it was only July 2019 that the council unanimously passed the first motion to really kickstart this work as a county council. So to be in this stage today, to have a 9-year plan to reach carbon zero by 2030 is a real achievement. And I feel very pleased that together everyone's worked on this, and that county councillors have stayed unanimous behind the plan, and let's hope that continues again today. It's been a long journey, even though it's only been 18 months, and a lot of things have happened, and public engagement and pressure groups have been involved and been talking to the council and explaining what they think we should be doing. And I have to say, generally, it's been very amicable, and they've continued to challenge, and we will continue to challenge as well, and to try to move the council forward as we go on. It's been very good to see that people have worked together as a whole council, and the support of the officers, and Brian's mentioned it, and you, Chair, as well. We've been very fortunate to have Helen leading the team, and her effort has been sterling in this, and the vision that she's taken on. I have to say, December's meeting for me was a real change for the county council, because approving a change in the constitution means that it's everybody's job to get on with this progress now. It's not just managers, and it's not just county councillors or cabinet members. It's everybody's job to be involved, and I was really pleased for that. Well, we've got a plan now that's being put to the council today. It's a 9-year plan. 9 years, I'm sure, will go quickly, and I don't know how many of us will survive that particular period. But it's a plan there which works towards certain goals in reductions and also improvement in sequestration of carbon. It is really important, and I'm glad this has been built in, that as we're going through those 9 years, it's been monitored very carefully, and we need to be able to challenge what's going on. And if things are easy, then we're not being ambitious enough. And if things are easy, I think we need to be challenging and saying, well, let's up the target a bit more then, and let's go a carbon negative council even. That would be absolutely brilliant. So I do hope the council will approve this unanimously, because that would just show that we are really working together to tackle a really major problem. Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr I chi.
If I can jump in there, Chair, as the lead, before you move on to the members, I think it is worth mentioning from a political point of view, Councillor Timms has briefly mentioned it, that we have worked together. That should be stressed, that point. I've worked with Graham, he's worked with me, and it's all gone superbly well. So it is worth a mention in dispatches, and I personally would like to put it on record. Thank you, Councillor Graham Timms, for all your assistance in this matter over the past 18 months.
Diolch yn fawr, Brian. A diolch I chi, Graham, am y geiriau caredig yna. Cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill.
Thank you. Yep, thank you, Chair. All I just wanted to comment on, because Brian did touch upon it in his introduction, was in relation to the funding of this. This is obviously entirely the right thing to do, and I fully support the strategy being adopted. As I'm sure you'll all remember, we did agree as part of the budget last month when we approved that, putting in around about £390,000 of revenue funding into the budget, and that would allow us to support the prudential borrowing for the initial period of the programme of works to deliver this. I think all I just wanted to say today, obviously, is that that's only the start of it. And we need to realise, obviously, by approving this today, as we do with other long-term programmes of work, that we are essentially committing our successors to finding additional funding over and above that, which will mean, obviously, that something else presumably won't be able to get done at that point. But I just wanted to reassure members that the funding for the initial period, has been agreed as part of the budget this year.
Diolch yn fawr, Julian. Diolch i chi am yr addewid yna. Cynghorydd Bobby Feely. Bobby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as others have said, it is excellent, the focus that's been put on our net carbon zero programme and ecologically positive programme by 2030. And I, with everybody else, would like to congratulate the team led by Helen Bourne-Evans on this being, the achievement so far. Obviously, as Julian has just said, it's not without financial implications. And some of the funding will come from us, as we've said, over the next 10 years, some from Welsh Government and some from grant funding. So one of my two questions is, have we got sufficient staffing resources to work on this important, staffing resources, should I say, to work on the grant funding that's going to be so necessary for the financial viability of this programme? That's one. And the other question is, I feel, although we've done quite a bit already, we need a very big raising awareness programme, because as Graham touched on, similar to the importance of people taking responsibility for their own health and well-being, we need to ensure the residents of Denbighshire take on responsibility towards this programme, because they can so easily do that. There are lots of things all the individuals across Denbighshire can do with their own lives, in their own lives, to help this programme forward. So I just wondered if there was an answer to those two questions, please.
Yeah, are you happy with that, Helen?
Yeah, I can take them, Brian, that's fine. Diolch yn fawr, Bobby. So if I take your second question, so the strategy does recognise the influence the council can make over the geographical space of Denbighshire in relation to reducing carbon, increasing carbon absorption and improving biodiversity, whilst we recognise that the targets are council specific. So in the strategy there's the action particularly looking at schools, residents, businesses and landowners having a programme of initiatives around raising awareness, sharing, learning to encourage everyone to do the right thing. We talked about this at the last Climate Change and Ecological Emergency Working Group, as you know, and there's actually, I think it was January's, apologies, that we talked about it. I've got a member of staff.
Struggling to hear Helen. Helen, you keep breaking up. For me, I don't know whether it's the same for everybody else.
I'll turn off my video.
Have you got a button you can press?
I've turned off my video. I hope that's better. I was just saying, is that better?
Indeed, Helen.
Yeah. So I was just saying, Bobby, that there is a piece of work being undertaken currently by Liz Wilcox-Jones, Climate Change Project Manager, around a comms and behaviour change programme for next financial year 21-22. That's going to be discussed with our central corporate communications team at the beginning of March, and that builds on kind of the ideas and work that was discussed at the Climate Change and Ecological Political Working Group back in January. Regarding the first question, sufficient staffing resources, grant funding viability, I think you make a sound observation. To secure grant funding requires effort to coordinate and to submit a really strong application. That is part of the mix of the Climate and Ecological Change Programme Office, which will be myself and 2 other officers. We can always have more, but I think for now, for this first 3-year period, I think we're doing okay. We've sort of, with Budget Board, thought about staffing required within service as well, and we'll continue looking at that, and each year sort of assess what's needed and put plans to Budget Board and to Cabinet and Council through the budget setting process. But today, as we stand for 21-22, I think we're in a good stead, and we're already seeing that Welsh Government in particular are aligning a lot of grant funding, not specifically about climate change, with the green agenda. So we're in a good place if members are minded to approve the strategy today, to sort of actively have those conversations with Welsh Government and others around attracting external funding. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch Helen.
Thank you.
Iawn, Cyngor Bobby Feely.
Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Ymlaen felly i Cynghorydd Eryl Williams, a croeso nôl.
Diolch.
Eryl.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Nais i ti'n hammer ai ffwrdd hefyd. Un cwestiwn sy'n licio sicrhau di, ac mi ddweud y gair, Tony Thomas y gair am wetlands pan nhw'n siarad am prestatyn. Efallai gael sicrhau bod yna ddim plannu coed mewn dim wetlands yn cael ei wneud, oherwydd un o'r pethau sydd wedi cael ei digwydd yn aml iawn yn yr ardal yma, wedi gan y coedwigaeth neu'r Natural Resources Wales coedwigaeth, plannu coed mewn llefydd gwlyb, a mae'r llefydd gwlyb yma yn arbed dŵr fynd lawr boglands i dŵr fynd lawr i'r dyffrynnoedd. A mae o'n counterproductive i sicrhau cadw dŵr yn yr ucheldir. So, dwi'n sicrhau bod yna ddim plannu coed mewn tir gwlyb. Cos dwi'n gwybod mae'r Comisiwn Coedwigaeth, neu bynnag yn cael ei galw rwan, mae'n gofod codi coed i fyny, yn ei plannu nhw ar bogs a bethau fel yna. So, dwi'n sicrhau o hyn yn sgwach yn dda.
Diolch Eryl. Helen, eisiau ateb? Os na mateb?
Certainly, Chair. Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. 2020-21 challenge. Diolch yn fawr, Eryl. So this is what's quite unique, I think, about this council and your emergency declaration made in 2019, and how we're approaching this. That you've tied the 2 agendas together appropriately. So you've tied tackling climate change, but also nature's decline. So it's net carbon zero and ecologically positive. What that means is that we hope to never be in that position, Errol, where we're causing harm to a habitat of importance for the benefit of carbon reduction, i.e. Planting of trees. So I think we've put the safeguards in place to avoid that happening. And what we're wanting to do is maximise on any co-benefits. So if there can be appropriate tree planting on appropriate land, which also reduces the risk of flooding downstream, then we will do, but not to the detriment of an ecologically sensitive or important landscape. Thus the 2 priorities, net carbon zero and ecologically positive by 2030.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch, Helen. I get the ecological and things like that, but I would like the environmental agency, whoever is responsible for flooding, to say that getting rid of a bog area will not create a detriment before any planting is done. It's been done around this area, and Llangollen Moors and places like that, where trees have been planted on bogs. And there was a programme on S4C last week or the week before, where they were uplifting these trees up, which they had planted, and it was creating a big, it would stop the retention of water. And retention of water is a big issue in climate change.
Diolch yn fawr, Eryl. Cynghorydd Emrys Wyn ydy'r nesaf.
Diolch yn fawr, Gadeirydd. Diolch am adael fi mewn sydd ar ôl Eryl, achos gael hefyd gyfeirio at hyn heb ailadrodd be mae Eryl wedi dweud. Ond rhaid i ni gofio bod y tiroedd gwlyb yn gyda'r gallu i fedru amsugno yr glawogydd trymion ychwanegol mae wedi weld yn ymddangos yn ei cael y dyddiau hyn y blynyddoedd hyn. Mae'r tiroedd ucheldir gwlyb yma yn gallu amddiffyn yr hyn sy'n digwydd i lawr y dyffryn wedyn. Achos dyna sy'n digwydd yn mae'r rhaid i'r dŵr mae'n redeg i rywle ac ar i lawr yr eitho ac mae o'n cloni yn aml iawn, fel dyn ni wedi gweld yn Iwerddon yn Rhuthun, yn y mannau isa o'r dyffryn. Ac gai ychwanegu at hynny, dyma pan o'n eisiau siarad yn mwy na'n byd, ond bod yn cysylltiad be yma Eryl newydd ddeud. Mi fues i ac aelod arall John Butterton, ddaethon ni ar y gwrs yn ddiweddar gyda ar y carbon literacy for local authorities, dan arweiniad ffion Sutton Wilson. Gai ddiolch i Cyngor Sir am drefnu hwn ar yn cyfer ni. Mi roedd o'n ardderchog a deud y gwir. Mi roedd o'n gwrs arbennig, ond o'n werthfawr iawn, ges i manteisio ar nes i gymryd y sesiynau 2 hanner diwrnod. Os daw na gyfle eto, dwi'n annog yr aelodau i fynd arno fo, achos oedd yn mor arosgiadol i mi, ac wrth gwrs oedd nhw'n cyfeirio at y tiroedd gwlyb ac effaith y coed. Balans ydi o'n y diwedd wrth gwrs, ond mae gwarchod y tiroedd gwlyb yn hanfodol gwarchod ei dyfnod ni nes i lawr efo llifogydd ag ati dyfodol. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Emrys. Cynghorydd Martin Holland. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, can I just add my thanks to Helen and her team, because this is an excellent report, and I must admit it's one of the most comprehensive I've read. It does bring home, a lot of the issues that we're facing. It still doesn't, unfortunately, sort of cover the elephant in the room, which of course is the population growth around the world, which is part of the problem in relation to, loss of habitat and loss of other animal groups. But that's not for us to decide, sadly. That's for people a bit further up the political hierarchy to look at that issue. And certainly as United Nations, we should be doing that. Just a couple of quick questions, if I may. As far as local development plans are concerned, will we be changing our policy in relation to the number of houses that we expect to be built in developments to allow a little bit more green space and for the planting of trees? On the enforcement side, we often make conditions in our planning applications to say that trees and shrubbery and things should be planted. Are we going to check that in future to make sure that that's complied with? Just as a matter of interest, actually in the report, one thing I did notice was Himalayan balsam, a picture of Himalayan balsam in the document. I'm hoping that our campaigns to get rid of that won't affect the balance of nature, but it's something we need to do. Are we going to work to, my third question is, are we going to be working with felling, NRW in relation to tree felling licenses? I'm aware that lots of small woodlands are being sold off in plots, that people can actually remove 20 square meters of woodland a year themselves. But for anything bigger than that, they have to have tree felling licenses. It seems a shame that we're encouraging the planting of trees, and I'm becoming aware that there are a lot more tree felling licenses being issued to small plot holders to clear considerable areas of our woodland. So are we working with NRW on that one? And the final thing I'd just like to say is that we've had an aggressive, rightly so, school building program, and we've built some very good new schools. It would be interesting at some stage to see the comparison between the energy that's used in the new schools to the energy that was used in the old schools, to see actually if we are achieving things that we should be achieving. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n gwybod ydy Glenn eisiau dod I fewn wan efo cwestiwn sydyn?
Yes, please. Firstly, let me thank Helen for phoning me yesterday and also for the email, but there's been some confusion over where borders lie with Upper Denby and where the corporate plan specifically states West Rhyl and Upper Denby for planting trees. Now, I'm a great believer in planting trees wherever there's a gap to put a tree. So, I think it's important also that we think about our estates and the environment that we live in, and putting trees in society, in the centres and on the estates is a good way of going forward. I'd like to thank Gary Davies also from Countryside Services, who's offered to go for a walk around the ward. Now, we have done that before, and as restrictions are still in place, I don't think it's appropriate that I meet up at the moment, but certainly in the future we can go round again if Gary Davies gets to hear about this. So, it's great work that's going on. Helen's got some great ideas around forests and mini forests. I don't know if she wants to explain that to council, but I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Wedyn nawn ni ofyn am ymatebion i chi'ch dau, ie? Helen sy'n ateb?
Happy to answer, Chair. Diolch yn fawr, Emrys. I'm really pleased that you've enjoyed the carbon literacy training course. Just to let members know that there are places still available for courses happening in March, and I believe you've been sent emails from fellow councillors with that link. Happy to send that again to councillors if you so wish. So thank you very much, Emrys. Martin, thank you again for your kind words. Regarding LDP changes, I'm not sure if Councillor Mark Young wishes to come in. I've been attending a strategic planning group which Mark chairs, and they received a paper just last week, I think, showing the various places which the new LDP could consider changes to address this topic. I won't say any more because I'm sure Mark will want to say more. Enforcement, yes, absolutely a good point. Again, we're working with Paul Mead within planning on this strategy, and I'm going to their management team just to see what they can do next financial year within their service business plan relating to this strategy. Himalayan balsam photo, those photos used are just to give an indication of what the habitats look like for people that aren't experts, but we don't want to be promoting anything that's non-native, so I will look at that, Martin, and just see if we can pick a different photo. Natural Resource Wales tree felling licence. We are wanting to work with Natural Resource Wales. We had a member of Natural Resource Wales come and present to the Climate Change and Ecological Emergency Working Group. There's a good connection there that we'll build on. The tree felling issue, I think you raised, Martin, at the last working group meeting, and also it was raised just to work collaboratively with Natural Resource Wales on our tree planting plans as well. So that's something that we will be doing. And I think that was all of the questions, Chair. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. All right, Martin?
Hello, yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask Mark Young i ddod I mewn.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. I've turned my camera off. Hopefully you can hear me, everyone. Yeah, so thanks for that, Helen, and the question, Martin. So as lead member and with the support of the SPG committee, we are keen to make our new LDP as green as possible for our residents and wildlife across Denbighshire. And I believe with the continual support of members, officers, we can achieve our ambition, having one of the greenest LDPs in Wales. What has been mentioned, we have to keep that momentum going, and Councillor Alan James and our previous LDP mentioned the capacity to do that, Helen. So, and Councillor Feely raised that today. So I think it's really important that if we do need extra capacity for as we go forward with the LDP, please ask. And I think it's really important that we've got this knowledge base, and you've seen off the report, Helen, in the last SPG, the quality and the knowledge of officers, which is fantastic. But Welsh Government have announced another 270 million for making our town centres greener. So I hope we're going to share our knowledge with residents and businesses. Is one question off me, but I look forward to working with everyone to make our LDP the greenest and best we can for our residents. Thank you, Jock.
Diolch yn fawr, Mark. Dwi'n gwybod o'n gwestiwn o fanne, Helen?
There was a question about the new funding being announced by Welsh Government. 270 million was announced yesterday, and I think it's important that we support our town centres and businesses to access that with any knowledge and skills we can share with them. Thank you. So I hope that's going to be our approach.
Chair, Cadeirydd?
Diolch yn fawr.
Just one comment, and it says the Welsh Government's giving them money. Most of this European money in the rural community for diversification and environmental concerns was originally farmers' money. So let's never forget that, okay? Because it was the farmers' subsidies or whatever. That was where all that money for most of the environmental projects has come from. So it's the farmers that have funded the projects really by now. Sorry, I need to get that in.
Na, diolch yn fawr Eryl. Mae'n wybodaeth yn dydi. Gaid, fynd ymlaen felly, mae gennym ni ddau gynghorydd arall, sef y cynghorydd Emrys Wyn a cynghorydd Hugh Evans. Nagwes Emrys, iawn, nawn ni fynd syth i'r arweinydd Hugh Evans. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch Meirig, mae'n ateb cwestiwn wedi cael ei ateb efo sut da ni'n mynd i hybu hwn efo bobl tu allan i'r sir, enwedig y cyhoedd, y sector breifat a disgwyliadau fysa ni'n licio rhoi arnyn nhw hefyd. Da ni wedi dangos bod ni yn arwen ar hwn o fewn yr awdurdod, ond mae yna pictiwr lot mwy eang na hynny'n does i ni o fewn y sir. Ond hefyd jyst i rhoi gwybodaeth i aelodau, dwi wedi gyrru llythyr i cadeirydd y Bwrdd Uchelgais Gogledd Cymru yn gofyn wrthyn nhw i trafod hwn yn y bwrdd nesaf gobeithio i jyst cael dealltwriaeth o'r buddsoddiadau sy'n mynd i ddigwydd yn yr rhanbarth bod yr agenda yma yn cael ei trafod a bod yna dealltwriaeth o be mae hynny'n edrych fel. A hefyd, wrach beth sy'n ni'n cwestiwn wrach ar diwedd hwn, Meirig, ydy be ar Graham Timms codi yn sut fedrwn ni fel aelodau cael rhyw fath o assurance, yn ni'n deud dwi'n gwybod beth yw'r gair Cymraeg amdano fo, gan y gwasanaethau bod hwn yn cael ei monitro ac evaluatio yn eitha gyson gan y gwasanaethau, bod ni'n gwybod mae heddiw wedi'r dechrau'r siwrna ynda, mae'n siwrna hir, siwrna heriol yn ariannol, ond sut mae'r gwasanaethau mynd i ymddwyn yn hwn a sut da ni'n mynd i fod yn mesur sut mae'r gwasanaethau wedi ymateb. So dyna di'r cwestiwn Meirig, please.
Diolch yn fawr, Hugh. Helen, da chi yn barod i ymateb?
Yes, Chair, diolch. Diolch, Hugh. So in terms of the approach we've taken, the strategy's been, I'm trying to do this in a way that it doesn't sound dead boring, but I think I'm just going to go for it. So the strategy's been put on the council's performance and project management system called Verto. So all of the actions that are listed in the policy changes and within those sections around what we're going to do to reduce carbon from waste, etc. All of those are individual actions that are now on our council's performance and project management system. That system also is used for service business plans, and it's also used for your performance management. So all the reports that you get quarterly into scrutiny, into cabinet and into council, the integrated performance management of the council reports that you get, which often are presented by YOLO, that will all feature the targets within this document to reduce carbon from the various sources, to increase carbon absorption from grassland and woodland, and to improve species richness. You will see that integrated within those reports. Services it's all gone into service business plans, and then it's sort of a negotiation of what they're able to deliver next financial year and beyond. You can see that the strategy's in 3-year blocks, so not everything has to be delivered or can be delivered from the 1st of April over next financial year, but you've got kind of stuff that you want to deliver earlier and things that can wait to the middle 3 years and the end 3 years. So that's been again integrated with the council's strategic planning and performance team, where there's an officer that supports, a nominated officer that supports every service area and the heads of service. And also what we're wanting to do is come back to full council with an annual report linking back to your emergency declaration and progress made to the strategy and things we're looking at in the future. And and then you've got the corporate plan board. So this strategy will sit under your existing environment priority within your existing corporate plan until the end of this council, which is May 2022. And any exceptions will be reported to that board, which, as you know, is all heads of service, directors, chief exec, and cabinet. And then we've got the role of scrutiny and what scrutiny chairs and vice chairs and also the head of internal audit might wish to do. And that's at their discretion, whether they would like to call in on a specific topic that's within their right, or if they wish to set up, in addition, a task and finish or advisory group, which is cross-party. That is also in their discretion, and I'm aware that they're in the process, chairs and vice chairs group, of talking that through. So I feel like it's been integrated, as well as given a bit of a standalone focus as well. But welcome to have additional conversations about that. Thank you.
Diolch, Helen. Ydy hynny'n ymateb yn iawn?
Diolch, Meirig, yndi. Oedd hwnna ddim yn boring o gwbl, Meirig, oedd o'n eitha diddorol. A jyst bod ni fel aelodau yn ymwybodol o sut mae hwn yn cael ei llywodraethu, dim jyst y blwyddyn nesaf, ond ar ôl i ni, ar ôl y cyngor nesaf yma.
Diolch,
Meirig.
Glenn, da chi'n dangos banner, dwi'n gwybod be mae'n feddwl.
No, I don't want anything, thank you.
A na ddwy fyny wan. O, dyna ni. Da ni'n dal efo un banner. Iawn. O Bobby eisiau dod nôl? Cynghorydd Bobby Feely? Nagwedd? Iawn. Eisiau dod nôl? Cynghorydd Martin Holland? No. Iawn. Felly, da ni'n barod i fynd.
No, thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Iawn. Iawn fo. Brian, da chi am gynnig yr argymhelliad?
Yeah, no problem. Just before I read them out, if I could slip it in very quickly, the carbon literacy training for members has been mentioned. It's been an over 90% uptake. So that's good news. That needs another brief area in there, which I've just given it. So on to the recommendations at 3.1, that the council approved to adopt the Ddinbych County Council's climate and ecological change strategy for 2021-22 through to 2029-30. And 3.2, that the council confirms that it has read, understood, and taken account of the wellbeing impact assessment at Appendix A of the declaration.
Mae di torri fyny, ond dwi'n meddwl beth dwi'n medru ddarllen o. Diolch, Brian. Os rwy'n yn eilio, Tony? Wel, mae di eilio gyn a pawb, felly mae di cynnig a eilio. Wrach, nawn ni roi cynnig ar pawb sy'n gwrthod. Gynta, nawn ni weithio o chwith i'r ffordd arferol. Pawb sy'n gwrthod derbyn yr argymhellion. Newch chi ddangos. Neb? Ac rwy'n yn ymatal? Na, felly mae'n ymddangos bod ni gyd yn cydweld, felly nawn ni roi llaw fyny os da chi am wneud, ond dwi'n meddwl bod yna neb wedi mynd yn erbyn. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Dyna ni, wel, be di'r gloch? Mae hi wan yn 11:10. Da ni bod yma ers meeting, dwi'n siŵr fas ni'n hoffi paned yn y siambar, beth bynnag. Felly nawn ni gael 10 munud, chwarter awr y doriad. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
The Muppet Show, but I didn't say anything.
Cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill sy'n cyflwyno eitem 7, felly ga i ofyn i Julian. Gwelwch yn dda? Julian?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. You'll all, of course, remember that we approved at our last meeting and adopted, the minutes were adopted earlier, the Denbighshire County Council element of council tax for the forthcoming 12-month period. This paper, as I'm sure you'll be aware from previous years, is the one where we have to do it in a set format in order to legally be able to issue the council tax bills. And this report includes the elements from the other two parties that contribute to the council tax bill, namely the City, Town and Community Council precept and the precept from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. Just to very quickly take you through the detail of the report, which is contained in Appendix A, I think it is, or one or the other. Appendix A. So that the first section gives us the background to the decisions that we took at the last meeting. I'll ask Steve to come in after I've finished because he has to go through some formal pronouncements to say that he believes that everything is deliverable and legal. And then we go into the detail of the report. So section 2 gives the schedule of each town and community council precept for last year and this coming year. Section 3 details how the actual calculations are brought about, which resulted in the final figure in G, which is the base council tax figure. So then in section 4, we add the band D Denbighshire elements, which we've just talked about, to each of the individual community council, town and community council precepts. Section 5 then deals with the Police and Crime Commissioner precept, which, as you'll see there, is just under £12.4 million for the coming year, and you'll see the impact of that on the various valuation bands. And then we come to section 6 of the report, which basically adds all the three elements together, and that's contained within Appendix C to your pack. We then finally go on to section 7, which is the treatment of a number of prescribed classes of dwellings under the regulations, all of which are set out there for you. And then we come to the formal recommendations that we actually have to come to. So as I say, it is a bit of a procedural one, this one, but we can't actually send the council tax bills out unless we've been through this process and we do the recommendations which are in the report in the prescribed format. So that essentially is all we're actually voting on today, nothing to do with our elements of anything. It's to be able to legally send out council tax bills to the various council taxpayers throughout the county. So I'll hand over now to Steve, because as I say, he needs to give some formal assurances to you about the budget. And then if there are any questions, I'm sure we'll take those then before I move on to the recommendations. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Thanks, Chair. I mean, the formal Section 151 officer statements included Appendix A 1.2, and just above that in 1.1, it just has a summary of the budget proposals that were approved by Cabinet and then yourselves in January. And that's what my statement is really about. It's saying that with this council tax level, you know, I can recommend that the funding will be sufficient for the next 12 months, starting from April the 1st. There's two elements that's fair to you about the robust budget estimates, and that's very much around, you know, I believe at this stage we've taken into consideration all those things that I can, you know, realistically be expected to predict. Obviously, last financial year saw something that was totally unexceptional, and those things that, you know, obviously can't be taken into account. But really, it's around things like pay awards and things like that, inflation, pressures around social care, things like that. That I believe that the budget that the council tax is based on is robust. Adequacy of reserves. Now, fortunately, because of the help we've received from Welsh Government this financial year to cover the impact of coronavirus, the pandemic, which currently stands at about 16 million help for the council itself, not including anything to do with the funding that we've passed over to businesses and things like that. Specifically to help the council budget, we've managed to maintain our base level reserves and specific reserves for things like winter maintenance, unusual weather events and things like that. Our level of reserves, I think, is prudent, and yeah, I fully recommend this report. So over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Ni wedi cael rhan fwyaf, Steve. Diolch yn fawr. Oeddech chi'n torri fyny dipyn bach. Dwi'n meddwl bod ni wedi cael y neges yn ddigon clir. Diolch yn fawr I chi. Mae gynna I gwestiwn, ga I alw ar cynghorydd Paul Penlington. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Before, I've got some points to make, but I'd just like to say Julian started this item by saying we approved a council tax rise of 3.8% in January. I'd just like to point out that the Plaid Cymru Group didn't approve it, and the Plaid Cymru Group were also the only people to speak on the item and ask any questions on the item in January. But that was just in response to what Julian just said. The points I'd like to make today are: an audit report in January slammed the council's handling of the contracts and finances of the demolition and development of the Queen's Building in Rhyl. That project has only just begun, but is already 57% over budget, and costs are likely to continue spiralling. All despite an additional £1.5 million being generously granted to it last September by the Cabinet. Coincidentally, this 3.8% council tax rise we're talking about right now will raise £1.5 million needed to meet our budget shortfall. The wellbeing assessment presented to us in January stated residents of Denbighshire hadn't been consulted with regard to this council tax rise. The average income in Denbighshire is around about £24,000. Many, of course, will be on a lot less than that. People on an average income will now work around 1 month just to pay their council tax. Is that in order to fund an unwanted, unasked for, out of control white elephant in Rhyl? And do you believe that our residents' needs and wishes are being properly met and considered? And what are the prospects for future council tax rises as the costs of this project continue to rise?
Diolch yn fawr, Paul. Mae gennym ni un arall sydd dod I mewn, felly tra da chi'n meddwl am yr ymateb, ga I ofyn I cynghorydd Glenn Swinglers, gwelwch dda. Glenn?
Yeah, thank you. I think the first thing to mention here, as well, yeah, let's back Paul up on this one. Yeah, Plaid Cymru are the only ones that spoke on this, and we are the only ones that voted against it, and I'll continue to vote against. But I'd like to thank some of our community and town councils who seem to have been able to either limit their raises of their precept, or in some cases have cut the precept. And that's very, very welcome news for those in society that are going to struggle going forward. As I said before, I voted against in the past, I'll continue to vote against now. Thank you.
Diolch, Glenn. Os yna neb arall, ydych chi ymateb, Julian, neu Steve?
Yes, I'll come in first if I may, Chair. Steve may want to add something on the specifics. Just on a procedural point, and I'm sure Gary will correct me if I'm saying something incorrect. Both Paul and Glenn were quite correct that they spoke and voted against the budget last month, as they were perfectly entitled so to do. But just on the procedural point, as we live in a democracy, it's the majority decision that was actually taken becomes binding on all members of the council, whether they actually voted for an item or whether they voted against it. So in that respect, we is the corporate we in terms of Denbighshire County Council's budget. That's what I was referring to. In terms of Paul's comments about Queen's Buildings, that is actually a bit of a red herring in terms of this debate, although I accept there are other items that were raised in the recent corporate governance debate that we had on the subject, because that refers to capital funding, which is allocated to a capital project and not revenue funding. And whilst we do use for a number of schemes revenue funding in order to support prudential borrowing, we talked about it earlier, the environmental programme of works that we're putting in place will be funded obviously from revenue funding. The Queen's Buildings element the Cabinet approved was actually capital and therefore has no relevance on the council tax increase that was actually put in place. The reasons for the council tax, I don't wish to obviously, re-debate the issue that we had last month. The summary of what we actually put in the budget is in section 1 of Appendix 1 to this report for information purposes, but you will see quite clearly what the council tax increase is going towards funding. It's going towards funding increased investment in schools, increased investment in both adult and children's social care. It's going towards funding the environmental works and the ash dieback that we were talking about earlier. And it's going to a number of other areas that you'll see detail there. And that is what we're actually spending the additional funding on, all essential items. So I would have to dispute Paul's comments about it being frittered away on a project in RHEOL. Perfectly capable to have a debate, and we had a very good debate at Corporate Governance Committee the other week in terms of the funding of this particular project, and we will be going back again at a later date with regards to that particular project. Some capital projects do have issues. That is the inevitability of dealing with capital projects, and we have to deal with them as we get to them. And I'm sure that we might well get a similar question on the next paper, which actually deals with the capital elements. But in terms of the budget that's in front of you today, as I say, this isn't about our element of the budget. That debate has been and gone. This is purely about the legal formalities of issuing the council tax. So if you vote against it, you're basically saying you don't actually want us to comply with the law and send out a council tax bill to the residents.
Steve, dach chi eisiau dod I mewn?
Only to just just reiterate really about the capital element. The Queen's Buildings doesn't impact on the revenue budget. We have funded the overspend through capital receipts, all contained within the capital budget. We're not allowed to use capital receipts to fund revenue, so we have to abide by strict rules around the split between capital and revenue. I suppose the only other thing just to mention that obviously it's all comparative, but the proposed council tax that rate that we're setting or proposing to set is just below average for Wales. So we're sort of, just to give you some sort of comparisons, we did a round robin, and yeah, so just to give you some feel of where we stand within the rest of Wales.
Iawn, Steve, diolch yn fawr. Iawn, Paul, da chi eisiau dod nôl o gwbl ar yr atebion? Da chi ar mute. Sorry, Paul.
Sorry, I was unmuted and I muted myself. Yeah, it didn't really answer As this project spirals out of control, what are the future prospects for our council tax? And I appreciate there's different budgets for this, that and the other, but you tell that to the members of the residents of Denbighshire who are paying 1 month's wages for their council tax. The wellbeing impact assessment actually made reference to people's mental well-being. This is not contributing to that at all, is it?
I can only reaffirm, Chair, that it has the Queen's Buildings project, which I would also dispute is spiraling out of control, but that's a different debate for a different meeting. Is having zero
57% over budget already, and it's not even started.
Chair, we're veering off topic here.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Sgwelwch yn dda. Awn ni nôl I Julian. Mae'n trio sgwelwch yn dda.
Yes, thank you. I would just reaffirm, and I can't put it any simpler than this. I think Steve's also reaffirmed it, that Queen's Buildings project has had in the past no effect on council tax levels for residents. It's not in the current or the future financial years having any effect on council tax levels for residents, because we can't use revenue funding for a capital bill. It's as simple as that.
Dwi'n meddwl bod mae'r ateb yna wan. Ga I fynd at Cynghorydd Hugh Williams a wedyn fydd Brian Jones eisiau dod I mewn. Felly Hugh, I gychwyn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's quite frustrating to listen to political gain on here this morning. You know, I voted for the rise. I didn't want to, but there was no alternative. So, and I didn't see anybody from any political group who abstained from voting to it coming up with any political ideas. So I don't want to go down that route. I just want to, I don't know if I'm in the right place. Brian Jones had a workshop on my concerns on rural roads. Can some of the money being spent, what we're having extra from Welsh Government, be spent on rural roads? I know Brian did a great workshop. I couldn't attend, but he did brief me on it. Could anybody answer that, or am I in the wrong place? Am I too early? Thank you.
Gawn ni weld mewn munud, Hugh. Diolch yn fawr. Brian Jones sydd yn ymateb wan. Mae cynnig gwestiwn. Diolch yn fawr, Brian.
Yeah, one's directly to the subject, one's a bit off tangent. The first question is, obviously, I have to accept Councillor Penlington and Councillor Swindler voted against at the last meeting. Councillor Hugh Williams has briefly touched on it. Has Councillor Penlington or Councillor Swindler got any suggestions on what we might do to reduce the tax? That'd be interesting to hear, as opposed to just criticising and making points. Have they got any suggestions on what we can do? And then the question slightly off tangent, going to Councillor Penlington and to Councillor Swindler, is I've noticed their political colleagues in Gwynedd are debating a 3.7% tax rise, as he's done a lot of work, Councillor Penlington, on Denbighshire's tax and the Queen's Building. Does he know any detail he can give us on where they're spending their proposed 3.7% in Gwynedd?
Brian, dwi'n meddwl bod ni'n mynd I ddŵr dyfn wan. Dwi'n eisiau mynd lawr y ffordd yn ysgolch y dda. Ddim dyma pwyllgor newid mae gen I on, Brian, oherwydd mae peth wedi mynd drwy y pwyllgorau. Da ni'n cydweld heddiw, a da chi wedi clywed Julian yn deud, mae rhaid ni wneud hwn achos y gyfraith. Felly, os da chi eisiau Julian fynd drwy hwnna eto, na I ofyn I Julian, jyst ddeitha ni eto, pam bod ni yma heddiw yn pleidleisio ar hwn. Julian?
Chair, can I have an answer to my question, please?
Yes, of course, Chair. In order to be able to legally issue council tax bills, there are certain recommendations the council has to pass in order to be able to have those bills issued legally. And that's why when we come to them, the recommendations in section 3, I'm going to have to read them out individually and in length, including all the legal titles, because that actually is the wording that is prescribed in the legislation that we have to comply with in order to be able to issue the bills. And it's the background data is obviously we only have control over the Denbighshire elements of it, but we need obviously to include the elements from the city town and community councils, and also from the Police and Crime Commissioner. So that's what I've been through, and when we get to the recommendations, I'll go through those in the full formal wording. Hopefully that's clear.
Iawn, Hugh? Hugh Williams?
Sorry, Chair. Hugh had asked a question about highways. I think that might be one he might want to hold back until the next paper, which is actually on the capital plan.
Thank you.
Diolch, Julian. Iawn. Felly, da chi wedi cael pyn bach o drafodaeth. Dwi'n meddwl bod yna neb arall wedi dangos am siarad, felly awn i'r bleidlais. Felly, newch chi, Julian, ddarllen drwy eitem 3. Agenda
yes, Chair, my hand's up, Chair. Councillor Brian Jones.
Yeah, Brian.
I'd like to ask the question again of Councillor Pennington and Councillor Swindlin. Have they got any suggestions on what we can do to reduce the figures that we're looking in front of us? Can they come up with their suggestions? I'm eager to listen to their suggestions.
Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Let me answer that.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Debate happened last time. I haven't had much of the information before. I think we should move on.
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer if you want me to.
Julian, os dim modd newid dim heddiw, ydw i'n iawn? Diolch yn fawr. Julian?
In terms of our element of council tax, no, because we took that decision at last full council by a majority decision, and that recommendation was ratified when we approved the minutes earlier in this meeting.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly, os newch chi ddarllen rhif 3, a nawn ni fynd i gapleidleisio, ia?
Yep, I will do. Thank you very much, Chair. So 3.1, it is necessary for the County Council as the billing authority to consider the precepts received from the Police and Crime Commissioner for North Wales and the City, Town and Community Councils, and declare the council tax levels for the 2021-2022 financial year. 3.2, it is recommended that the amounts calculated by the Council for the 2021-2022 financial year, in accordance with sections 32 to 34, part 1 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, the Act, and alteration of requisite calculations Wales Regulations 2008, be as contained in Appendix A, Section 3. 3.3, it's recommended that the amounts calculated by the Council for the 2021-2022 financial year, in accordance with sections 34, part 2 to 36, part 1 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, the Act, be as Appendix A, Section 4. That the 3.4, that the amounts of council tax for the 2021-2022 financial year for each of the categories of dwellings be as shown in Appendix C. And finally, 3.5, that the level of discount for classes A, B and C as prescribed under the council tax prescribed class of dwellings Wales Regulations 2004 be set at 0 for the financial year 2021 to 2022, with the caveat that this is dependent on no changes to legislation or local conditions. I would move those 5 recommendations on block, Chair.
Ia, cyn i ni fynd dim pellach, os ga I ofyn cwestiwn i'r swyddog Gary Williams. Dwi'n sylwi o dan 3.1, Gary, mae cynghorau tref, cymuned a chyhoeddiad yn y blaen. Be am y ddinas yn Llanelwy? Oes angen I ddinas fod I fewn, neu ydy cyngor tref yn ddigon?
Dwi'n meddwl fod y disgrifiad o'r cyngorau tre a cymuned yn un sydd yn gyfreithiol. Dwi'n gwybod mae gynnon ni cyngor ddinas, ond fos o'n hollol iawn I ni just rhoi'r gair ddinas I fiewn, ond dwi'n meddwl o dan y gyfraith, mae cyngor dinas Llanelwy yn cyngor dre neu cymuned.
Dyna fod, a chi wedi clywed y esboniad ardderchog gyn Gary. Felly, eilydd ysgolwch yn dda I cynnig Julian Thompson Hill. Mae Hugh Evans, cynghorydd Hugh Evans wedi eilio. Felly, awn ni i'r bleidlais. Nawn ni gychwyn o'r tu ôl i'r tu blaen. Pawb sydd yn ymwrthod, newch chi ddangos. Gwrthod. Glenn, Rhys, Paul, dwi'm yn gweld neb arall. Iawn? Di pawb yn iawn? Dach chi wedi cael nhw? Y rhai sy'n gwrthod? Ia, mute a deud o yn erbyn os gwelwch yn dda, ydyn fyddwn ni'n glir. Paul? Unmute.
I'm against, Chair, thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Rhys?
Yn erbyn.
Diolch yn fawr. A pwy arall o'ne? Glenn, sorry. Glenn?
Against.
Dyna ni. Rwy'n arall? Iawn, dyna ymatal. Os yna rwy'n eisiau ymatal? Os newch chi siarad, mae'n neud yn hawsach. Dwi'n gweld hynny. Iawn, felly awn i'r bleidlais a bod ni'n derbyn y rhif 3 yn agenda 7. Pawb yn iawn? Dyna fo, dyna ni. Da chi'n iawn hefo hynna wan? Diolch yn fawr i chi, mae'n ddrwg gynnau am y trafferthion. Ymlaen i 8, ac Julian sydd yn agor eto. Diolch, Julian.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Oh dear, I'm hearing myself. That's never a good sign. Okay. This is the annual update on the capital plan. And I think, as you'll see, it contains a number of documents within the appendices. I haven't quite broken my own record, which I think was 14 appendices, but I'm getting quite close with 8 on this particular paper. One of the key documents, and I'll come back to this a little bit later on, is the capital strategy report, which is actually Appendix 7 in your packs, which gives a high-level overview of how capital expenditure, capital financing, and treasury management all help to contribute to us being able to deliver the council services. Appendix 1 to the report is a summary of the currently approved capital plan, which is broken down into a bit more detail in appendices 2 and 3, broken down by service and on the current scheme estimates. I would point out, in terms of the summary documents, this capital plan only reports on those schemes which are already confirmed and already have funding in place in terms of approvals. So in terms of future years, they will only contain those figures for those schemes which, say, might run over 2 or 3 years, but for which we've already agreed the funding. So that's why you'll see in future years that that the figures aren't as high as they are for the current and next financial year, when we have greater surety as to what the actual detail is. Appendix 4 to the report is a summary of the current major projects which are already underway. I report on this on a monthly basis to Cabinet as part of my monthly finance report. All of those schemes currently remain on time target. There have been a few slippages, obviously due to COVID, but those are now being built into the programs, and all of them remain on target in terms of budget as things stand at the moment. Appendices 5 and 6 deal with the recommendations which the Strategic Investment Group made to Cabinet, and Cabinet last week approved to come to yourselves today in terms of treatment of the the block allocations. So this relates solely to those block allocations, whether they be disabilities facilities grants, school maintenance for essential health and safety work, non-school health and safety work, those type of things, not the larger one-off projects which go through their own approval process. And you'll see in there that we had approximately £10.5 million of capital to allocate, and SIG reviewed those. We streamlined the process this year in that we didn't actually ask heads of service to present the bids this year. And as I said, the Cabinet, even though that did actually preclude us from our usual annual ritual humiliation of Phil Gilroy, who normally demonstrated some of the equipment by being hoisted up and down on them in Committee Room 1. So we weren't able to do that this year. In terms of the recommendations to you, those are summarised, as I say, in Appendix 6 in the report. But the recommendations are that we allocate £240,000 to minor adaptations, £1.2 million to housing improvement grants, which is essentially a disability facility grants, larger scale work to help make houses more amenable for people who have various difficulties. Then £3.651 million for essential health and safety works in schools, and £1.541 million of essential health and safety works to our non-school estate. And those two figures will meet the highest risk assessed priorities that we have. In addition, as part of the budget, there was agreed, this is one of the items I could have referred to in response to questions in the last issue. As part of the budget, we approved £100,000 of revenue funding to support approximately £1.75 million of prudential borrowing to put into our highways network. And in addition to that, there's a recommendation of putting a further £710,000 for structural and other repairs, which includes just over £400,000 for the 5th year of the 10-year rolling programme we have to deal with our bridges. As I say, this is the normal ongoing programme of works that had already been approved and doesn't cover any one-off schemes. Obviously, we're aware of the bridge that unfortunately collapsed due to Storm Christopher. That will be an external fund. It's a project that will be the service, no doubt, will be working on over the coming weeks and months. There's a recommendation for £324,000 for various road safety improvement schemes. And finally, as you will be aware also, we've been undergoing over the last number of years a programme of works to replace our lighting units in our street lighting columns with more environmentally friendly and less intrusive lighting. And that's been done by means of what's called a loan through a company called Salix, which is paid back over a 6-year period, essentially from the savings in the energy costs which have been accrued from the changeover to the more energy efficient equipment. And the recommendation is we take out a further £185,000 loan for that. And the only other issue with regards to those proposals is that we would also be putting in a £500,000 contingency budget as per usual on capital schemes. Anything that's not used out of that is rolled forward into the following year's capital allocations, and a new £500,000 put into the plan. So those were the recommendations from Strategic Investment Group to Cabinet last week, and Cabinet agreed those to put forward in front of yourselves. In terms of the some of the detail, I just wanted to highlight on the capital strategy report, which is Appendix 7. It relates primarily in terms of some of the performance indicators. And there's a bit of overlap in some respects to the next report, which is on Treasury Management, because some of those indicators a couple of years ago were moved out of the Treasury Management report and put into the Capital Strategy report. So currently our outstanding debt is just shy of £242 million, which is well within the agreed operational boundary and authorised limit that we set in this report this time last year. The figures you'll also see within the report detail that the operational boundary for the next financial year will be set at 310 million and authorised limit at 305 million pounds. The figures for the current year also are less than our forecast capital financing requirements. So I can definitely confirm, I'm sure Steve will a little bit later, that we have complied with all of our statutory duties in terms of the code of practice. One of the other areas which I know members are always very keen on seeing, this used to be reported in the Treasury Management reports, now in the strategy report, is the performance indicator on the ratio of our borrowing costs. And you'll see there that on the general account, that is currently 6.94%. So essentially we spend just under 7% of our annual revenue budget servicing our debt, and which has actually come down fractionally, slightly counterintuitive because obviously our borrowing levels have gone up. As our income goes up, the percentage has actually come down slightly. And in terms of the HRA account, you'll see that that level is just under 39.5%, which we would expect. Obviously, the rental that we get in from into the HRA is primarily there in order to both invest in our existing stock and to assist with building the new stock that we're in the process of doing. If I take you to section 2.5, which is table 2, which is the breakdown of funding sources, and section 2.7, which is table 3, which is the estimate of capital financing requirement, just to show again how that we're actually complying with regards to that. Section 2.9 deals with assets, how our treatment of assets, and then section 3 deals with treasury management, but I won't touch on that, seeing as we have a separate report going on to that a little bit later. And the one thing I will point out, both in this report and in the next report, and is contained within section 3.7, that at all times with our treasury management are 3 areas that we concentrate on in this order: are security, liquidity, and yield. So essentially, how secure is where we're investing, how quickly we can get it back, and only then do we consider any financial income that we can get as a result of that. And that has, as I've reported for a number of years, that income has essentially disappeared almost to nothing now, given the current levels of interest rate. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say. I know I have gone on a little bit there, but it is a multifunctional report which covers a number of areas. I don't know, Steve, did you want to pick out anything that I've missed out or make any additional comments before we go to questions, please?
Well, as usual, I've just been ticking off all the things I thought I might have to say, Julian, so thank you for that. I've just got two things to add very quickly. Obviously, the table 6 at 3.7, it does show quite, looks like we've got more investments than we have really, because that 28, well, almost 29 million at the end of last year, that was to do with the business grants, and we got prepayment for business grants for half the amount, so that was 16 million, and we also took a loan out knowing that we'd have to pay out those business grants, so that and we had to put the money somewhere while we were paying that out. So it just looks like we have, in the normal course of events, we usually it's usually unusual to have up to 15 million, but it's usually around about 5 million investments at any one time, and they're very short term. So as Julian says, you get very little yield from a short term investment. So we're basically putting it somewhere safe rather than trying to make money on it, although we obviously do that as well as a byproduct. And the only other thing I was going to point out was on Appendix 7, sorry, Appendix 5, we have the table that's on 1.1, Appendix 5, it's on page 135 of the papers, and that just breaks down the funding. The only point I'd want to make here is that out of that 10.5 million, for what we'd call sort of business as usual capital funding, you know, it's not some project that we want to go or build a new school or anything. This is just stuff that keeps our assets going, keeps our roads going, etc. Well, out of that 10.5, only 6 at the moment is coming direct from Welsh Government as part of the settlement. So you can see there we're finding £2 million almost for highways through prudential borrowing. So that's unsupported borrowing. So that does impact on our revenue budget. And we're also looking at obviously capital receipts, which is the most of that 2 million is capital receipts we've received in year that we can then apply and bolster our capital strategy. So it's just sort of to bear in mind really that yeah, we need to look at how we fund our business as usual capital going forward as well, because we don't get enough from Welsh Government as part of our base budget.
Diolch yn fawr, diolch i'r ddau o'ch chi. Ga I ofyn cwestiwn cyn I ni fynd I y cynghorydd sydd wedi dangos diddordeb. Ar tudalen 109 yn y Gymraeg, 111 yn y Saesneg, felly mae'r Gymraeg yn cymryd llai o le, digwydd bod. Mae'n deud yn Castell Bodelwyddan o dan 4.4, 700,000. Ydy hwnne am y darn o pia ni o'r castell? Mae'r swnio'n isel iawn. Wrach sa chi'n offi rhoi rhywbeth bach o gefndir I ni? Diolch yn fawr. Julian, sy'n ymateb?
I'll try to. I'm sure Steve will correct me if I give some incorrect information out of here. You'll be aware, because it's been ongoing for a number of years, that within the contract terms of the lease that we had originally with whatever they're called, they've just been taken over again, I think. So what was Bourne Leisure, Warner Leisure, whatever you want to, whatever they're called today, who ran the hotel, they had the right to exercise an option to buy that element of the building, which they exercised, and that is the net income result from that, because that was exercised and the money came in not that long ago. So that's what that's in relation to. That was the contractually obligated net figure that was involved. I think I'm right, Steve, with that.
Steve, da chi isio?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Ydy o'n isel oedd o'i fod yn filiwn, mae'n ddrwg gynna I? Ar un adeg?
Well, every sale we have is we have to sign off that we've done an annual valuation. So I can't remember what the external valuation was, but it would have been in the same order. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been approved. So every asset disposal has to go through that process where we have an external valuation. So it isn't just our officers sort of guessing how much value it is. So it has to go through a formal process and approval. Goes through AMG Asset Management Group as well.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Steve. Felly, awn ni I cynghorydd Bobby Feely efo cwestiwn.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, Julian. Of recent weeks, we've had some fairly severe flooding conditions, and I presume there will be works needed, whether it be on the roads to repair the damage done to the roads, or indeed new flood defences in certain areas, including the one I represent in Ruthin. Will there be money put aside for these projects out of the budget? Will that be a problem, or is there a contingency fund set aside for this sort of work?
Diolch, Julian.
Okay, do you want me to answer that, Chair? Yeah, okay. There was obviously there's a number of as you say, a number of areas where we suffer damage, and we, you know, unfortunately it's becoming the norm these days with the extremities of weather. As I say, the information that's in the report that's in front of you today deals with the routine day-to-day stuff. What it doesn't deal with are those exceptional circumstances. Like the most extreme probably would be the bridge to collapse, but there are a lot of other extreme impacts that have been had. There are Welsh Government funding streams that are available to deal with, I call them one-off items like that, but as I say, they're becoming more frequent than one-off, to which we obviously always apply for whatever we believe is eligible, and that goes through the various approvals process that the Welsh Government actually have to take us through. In addition, some of them, as you say, if they're going to be a new programme of works to improve flood defences, would need to become an additional bid that would need to go through the process separately. They wouldn't be treated on this. This report primarily deals, certainly in terms of the new allocations recommendations, it deals with the routine day-to-day business as usual work, not the exceptional work. Those would be dealt with outside of this and will be dealt with on an individual basis.
I gather that I did gather that, Julian, but I just thought, it was a general question about contingency available in these sort of crisis situations, because obviously it would be unsatisfactory for people who were badly affected to have to wait whilst we acquired the appropriate funding for whatever is very badly needed.
I mean, I can't speak on specifics, obviously, because it's outside of my expertise. But usually, schemes of that nature require you can't just do them overnight. They have to be designed. They have to go through a process. So that allows us then to submit business cases and get the appropriate funding put in place. I think Graham wanted to come in and share as well on this. Yeah.
Hello, Graham.
Yeah.
Deal, Chair, as well, just to add to Julian's answer there, it's some of the defence works around rivers, etc., are not our responsibility, of course, and are the responsibility of NRW. So we're working with our colleagues in NRW in the Ruthin case, because the defence there of the river overtopping is their responsibility. And so hopefully we're working with them, so they have a capital plan to do the necessary works there to make the improvements that are required to prevent flooding in the future. So it's a bit of a complex issue where we as a council are responsible for certain flooding things, and as Julian has mentioned, therefore we will need to kind of plan for those, and other flooding requirements or works are the responsibility of NRW, but we'll work with them and we'll work with the local members as well to keep them updated on the work of NRW. Just hopefully that's helpful, and particularly in the Ruthin case, the flood defence works on the river there, NRW's responsibility. Thank you.
Welcome, Graham. Iawn, Bobby?
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Na I ddod ata chi mewn munud, Eryl. Hugh Williams di'r nesa. Cynghorydd Hugh Williams.
Diolch, Mary. I think Julian's answered the question really in Bobby's answer, but I'm intrigued to know what Brian Jones has got as an alternative for rural roads as well. There was a workshop, and I'm just interested to see if we can use any of this extra money from Welsh Government. I've got roads in Llanganafel which are becoming dirt tracks. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Un cwestiwn arall eto. Cynghorydd Martin Holland. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In some ways, it's very similar because, you know, as a rural member, we have a lot of unclassified roads, C roads and B roads that are in an extremely poor state. And sadly, after the recent heavy rains, many of those have been washed away. I've also got concerns because we're looking at the bridges in our rural areas. We know some time ago that we were talking about £11 million worth of repairs. We have done some of that, but I think there's still a substantial amount of money or capital required to secure some of those bridges. So my question really is, what other opportunities have we got to tap into resources, either from Welsh Government, and just the point that Graham made earlier about NRW, if NRW are looking after the roads, do they have some sort of commitment towards, sorry, the rivers, do they have also some sort of commitment to the bridges? Because, you know, I've got at least one bridge in my ward that's under a 6-monthly review because it's dangerous. So is there any other avenues to get capital for some of these major projects? And as a county, we've spent an awful lot of money in our urban areas, but the rural areas, because a lot of the roads are minor roads or unclassified, they are now like farm tracks.
Diolch yn fawr. Martin. Eryl, ti eisiau dod mewn wan, a wedyn nawn ni gael yr atebion.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Graham yn dweud bod NRW yn gyfrifol am yr afonydd beth yma. Ac o ran yr wythyn, dwi'n meddwl, un o'r pethau falle bydd rhaid gwneud ydy sicrhau bod y dŵr ddim yn dod lawr yr afonydd. Fath maen nhw'n gwneud yn Conwy, yr afon Conwy yn Llarws, maen nhw'n edrych i sicrhau bod y lai o ddŵr dod lawr lle cwmp yn Mechno. So felly, gai ofyn bod ni yn y topiau, sef mae Hyw a fi, ydy'r ddau ardal, dwi'n meddwl, sydd yn pwyto yr afonydd i lawr i'r wythyn bod yn rhan o'r lŵp, os gwelwch yn dda.
Diolch yn fawr, Eryl. Iawn, pwy sydd eisiau cychwyn ar yr ymatebion? Julian, da chi eisiau cychwyn?
Yeah, okay. I'll try and kick off, but I'm sure, I know Graham wants to come in on part of it. I'm sure Steve will probably want to come in as well, and maybe other lead members might do things. We're crossing over into some other lead members' territory here.
Yeah.
In terms of Hugh's question, and I suppose Martin's as well, in terms of some of the rural roads, Welsh Government do or have historically provided us with additional funding over the last few years. We never know whether when we get it or where we get it, but we historically have got additional funding, and that has allowed us to carry out some of the larger schemes that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to have done utilising our own resource. Obviously, I'm not involved in how that's prioritised. There's obviously an entire methodology that the engineers use as to how that actually will be prioritised in terms of which areas, you know, are higher than others, and that wouldn't be for me to comment. We will just, any money that we get for that is passported to the service automatically to be able to do additional schemes. Martin's question on bridges, yes, I think I did pick up in my preamble part of the recommendations on the block allocations for highways. It was an allocation of £403,000, I think it was, which represents the 5th year of the normal routine elements of work to our bridge and other structures network. As you said, the team came up with a programme of works over 10 years, so roughly halfway through doing that. And in terms of that, all I can say is the team put forward what they think that they're actually able to deliver. That's what the 403,000 represents in terms of for 21-22, and that has always been approved to date. What they've asked for, they've had essentially on that. There are, and I'm far from an expert on it, but I remember from the presentations that officers have given, there is a limit in terms of what they can do. For instance, if they're going to do work on a certain bridge, they have to spend a year or 18 months sometimes drying it out before they can do it. So there's long lead-in times before they can actually do the reinstatement works. So it is all planned, as I understand it, in terms of that. And we certainly, whilst it has to be approved on an annual basis, I'm sure it would represent a priority area for the authority going forward in terms of its allocations. I think that's probably all I can pick up on. I don't know whether Graham or Steve wants to give a bit more detail.
Yeah, pushes you them out.
Steve, do you want to go first? Mine are very specific on the bridges and flooding issue.
Yeah, Steve, talk about.
Sorry, I lost my cursor there for a minute. I couldn't switch myself back on. Yeah, sorry, just an update on the flooding. Obviously, we have usually two elements of funding available for any flooding incident. One, I'm going to switch my camera off in case it's causing any disruption. There you go. So we have the initial response to the flooding. That's based on something called EFAS, or usually is. And we didn't qualify for the storms last February for that initial response. You need to, for us, we need to spend about over 460k on that initial response. However, saying that, we then worked with Welsh Government throughout the year on schemes that we wanted to put things right and to help the situation, repair, replacement of things. And we put a proposal of £1 million or over £1 million to Welsh Government, and they've paid that. We just got confirmation in the autumn, and we have actually received that money. Now, the same process is going on with the flooding that's just happened here a couple of weeks ago, except for the fact that they have actually relaxed the EFAS threshold limit. So they're saying that anything over 30,000 we can claim for, and we're going through that process as part of the COVID hardship claim process. So we're currently doing that, and we've got codes set up and we're reporting all that expenditure. Obviously, the bigger impact this time in financial terms wasn't the initial response, it's actually the damage that's been done, which is a lot. From what I've seen, the figures are a lot more significant than it was last February. But we are going through that same process with Welsh Government. Tony Ward's team has prepared a list of all the schemes that we need to do to rectify, including bridges, etc. And we've just sent that off to Welsh Government. So we're currently at that early stage of negotiation with Welsh Government to find out actually how much help we'll be getting. So obviously we'll need to react to that response. If they say, depending on what they say, if they're going to fund it all, fantastic. If they're not, we'll then have to review how we react as a council and how much we want to fund ourselves from reserves, etc., or capital receipts during the year. So it's very much at an early stage on that. And I suppose the only thing just to mention is that the final settlement is due at the beginning of March, and we're expecting that in that final settlement, we will have details of what funding will be available for COVID, and that might appear unrelated, but what that means is that might free up funding for other things if we know that we're definitely going to get some continued help for loss of income, etc., for COVID. So that might free up some resources to prioritise for highways, etc., or flooding. So just a bit of context there.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Steve. Mae hwnna'n gynhwysfawr iawn. Dwi'n meddwl bod Graham...
Chair, can I come in?
Graham, diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Chair. Just to say, Martin's question about bridges, NRW don't have responsibility for those. They are a highway structure. So as Steve has said, that's for us to resolve the maintenance of the bridges through our own capital allocation and through any funding we can get from Welsh Government. So it's not an NRW responsibility. We would take the lead on that. And I think Councillor Errol Williams raised the point. Yes, the physical engineering works, if you like, to flood banks to stop them from flooding, NRW responsibility. General river maintenance, in terms of, you know, people talk about dredging, etc. Again, NRW's responsibility or the adjacent landowner's responsibility, and they would need the permission of NRW to do any works. So our involvement on those two things are fairly marginal. Although further work, you know, works upstream in terms of longer term mitigation, tree planting, etc. We talked about maintaining earlier on, didn't we? We talked about maintaining flooded areas, etc. higher upstream. They can be quite important factors. And of course, we have a role to play in that in terms of land maintenance, etc. And just for members' information, of course, on all these flooding issues, without taking up any more discussion today on the budget issue, the budget agenda item, is Scrutiny have set up a task and finish group to look at flooding, which will involve members, officers, multi-agency, colleagues from NRW and Welsh Water, etc. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that group pans out over the coming weeks, months, and possibly even years, around understanding how we can perhaps work better together in the various agencies to address the issue of flooding. I don't know if the lead member, Brian Jones, has got anything to add on that. He's particularly keen on that group. He'll be able to make a big difference, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch, Graham. O'n i'n mynd i alw ar Brian, dweud y gwir. Os newch chi ddod ymlaen, diolch, Brian.
Yes, certainly, Chair. Yeah, following on from Graham, just a couple of snippets. Welsh Government have obviously put initiatives in place. It's not brand new information, this, but as an example, they've got flood and coastal erosion risk management. They've also got a national strategy for flood and coastal erosion risk management, where we can get involved, apply, and some of the funding there is 100%. So that will all be brought up, no doubt, at the group that Graham's mentioned. Going back to highways, obviously I've had my hand on the tiller for 3 3/4 years on the highways. My view is we're at the point that the network is deteriorating, and the longer we leave it, the bigger the challenge will be to get it back up to some level of normality. The head of service has put a business case together, which hasn't had an airing yet by Steve Gadd or Julian or anybody else at a high level. And that business case, following on from the workshop that we held the other week, which we got a favourable response to, that is asking for an overall commitment from the council of up to £4 million a year. And for me, we're at the point where some of us might remember old Macorba, where we hang around waiting for a pot of money that might come from Welsh Government and it might not. Steve Gadd's words are slightly positive, but what I want as the lead member is a firm commitment that we're going to put extra funding into the highways, look at the business case that the head of service and his team have put together, and find the money. I appreciate there's pressures all over the council, but there must be funds in layman terms down the sofa somewhere, which we can turn into capital monies and spend some money on the highways. But because if you don't, we'll carry on the way we are at the moment, certainly in the rural areas of the county. I'm leaving this meeting shortly to go and look at yet again more rural roads that require attention, but because the funding's not there, I'll have to come out with the same words. Well, yeah, appreciate Mr. and Mrs. Resident, your road's crumbling, but unfortunately there's a methodology on how we go about repairing the roads, and unfortunately your particular stretch of road dropped below the level that's required for it to be fixed, and that's bad news for them. They won't want to hear it. They're paying the rates, the taxes, and at the end of the day, I think they're entitled to have the roads fixed. So I want the business case to be seriously considered, and hopefully Mr. Gadd and Mr. Hale can find some money down the sofa, which they can turn into capital funding for the highways. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, diolch yn fawr, Brian. I think when you mentioned hand on the tiller was very apt, with all the flooding we've had. Diolch yn fawr, Brian. Dwi'n meddwl bod hynny wedi ateb y cwestiynau, os yw rhywun yn anghydweld? Na? Da chi...
Ga i just dod i mewn, os ydyn cadeirydd?
Na fo, iawn.
Sorry, o'n i'n mynd i ofyn cwestiynau am berthynas y cyfrifoldeb trwsio pontydd, ac mae Graham Bowles wedi ateb hwnnw, felly does am angen mynd ar ôl hwnnw. A dim ond sylw sydyn iawn, hyfryd clywed y cynghorydd Brian Jones rwan yn cydnabod bod yr angen edrych o ddifri ar yn priffyrdd ar draws y sir ac arbennig yn yr ardal etholaeth yn hun yr Rhuthun wrth gwrs, da ni gyd yn mynd i amddiffyn yn etholaethau. Mae yn ddrwg, da ni'n derbyn cwynion yn gyson, ydych chi'n gwybod am hynny, a mae yna waith mawr i wneud. Felly gai annog yr aelodau a phawb i dwylo lawr ochrau soffas i weld beth sy'n ar gael ar gyfer hyn. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Emrys. Ia, eilio hynny, mae ffyrdd cymeriadau gartref yna digon drwg. Dwi'n meddwl bod ni wedi gorffen efo'r cwestiynau, felly gai ofyn i'r cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill i fynd i'r rhif 8, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3 a 4. Diolch yn fawr, Julian.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just before I take it to the recommendations, obviously, as Brian has intimated, I'm aware there's this business case going around that will have to go through the normal approval processes. But just, I mean, don't quote me on this figure because I'm just scrolling on the back of an envelope here. But my rough calculation would be that if for something around £4 million per year, year on year, to support prudential borrowing, if we were to do it that way, would be somewhere in the region of around about £225,000, £230,000 of revenue a year we would need to set aside. You know, if members' priority is to do that, that's fine. It just means that won't be available to use for something else. Or, you know, we'd have to put something like 0.5% on council tax a year to actually do that. So those are the sort of debates that we will have in the fullness of time as it goes through the process. So if I can go to the recommendations, 3.1, that members note the latest position on the 2020-2021 element of the capital plan and the update on major projects. 3.2, that members support the recommendations of the Strategic Investment Group. I suppose that should actually say and Cabinet, actually, because this was written before Cabinet approved it, as detailed in Appendix 5 and summarised in Appendix 6. 3.3, that members approve the 2021-2022 capital plan. And 3.4, the members approve the capital strategy report for 2021-2022, as detailed in Appendix 7. Again, I'll move those all on block, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Eilydd? Y cynghorydd Hugh Evans, yr arweinydd, diolch yn fawr. Felly, nawn ni gychwyn o'r tu nôl eto. Yn erbyn, newch chi ddangos, neu deithau? Dwi'n clywed neb. Rwy'n eisiau ymatal? Neb. Felly, nawn ni dderbyn yr argymhelliad fel mae wedi cael ei ddeud, ia? Newch chi ddangos yn sydyn? A nawn ni drio gweld chi dyna fo. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Diolch i chi am eich ymynedd. Felly, awn ni'r rhif 9, a dwi'n meddwl mae Julian sydd yn cyflwyno hwn eto. Diolch yn fawr, Julian.
It is indeed, if my voice will hold out that long. Hopefully I won't take too long, at least on the introduction on this one. Treasury management is one of those facilities that the council undertakes, and generally it goes on in the background, and everything's fine until something goes wrong. Then I haven't sent to sleep already, have I? Then it's, you know, it becomes a big issue for us. So it's really making sure that we avoid getting into those sort of scenarios if it's humanly possible. I mean, in terms of our annual turnover, about £500 million goes through our accounts in any 1 year. And at any given time, we can have up to around about £20 million out for investment. So it is important that we have the treasury management strategy that actually is fit for purpose. The document in front of you today deals both with the Treasury Management Strategy, the final approval of the performance indicators, and also we formally agree annually the minimum revenue provision treatment as well. I said I'd repeat it in this element from the last report. There were three key elements to our Treasury Management Strategy that underpin everything, and those are security, liquidity, and yield. And as I said before, the security and liquidity are the two that we really concentrate on. Yield doesn't really apply anymore, to be if we're being frank. I think in one of the reports, Steve's had to find another decimal place to put after the naught to actually get the investment income. The capital prudential indicators were contained within this capital strategy report now, so those have now been removed from this particular report. So at least that shortens the report slightly. Appendix 1 is the actual main body of the strategy. I just want to highlight a couple of points for you in terms of that. The graphs on page 215 show the trends there. Essentially, we are a borrowing authority, so our borrowing is gradually increasing, and our investment balances are gradually reducing. The report then goes on to cover a number of areas of who we're allowed to invest with, for how long. The section 4 deals with our borrowing strategies. Steve already advised in one of his responses on the last paper that we locked in another loan last March. We were planning on borrowing anyway during the course of the year, but we went in earlier in order to ensure that we had sufficient cash flow for when we were paying out the initial tranche of Welsh Government grants. So we locked that in at an advantageous rate then. It then goes on to cover debt rescheduling. It's very much reduced the scope that we have these days for rescheduling our debt due to the penalty clauses that are essentially inserted by the Treasury on doing that. I suppose you can understand that, seeing as we primarily, well, essentially all was borrowed from the Treasury in one form or another. So I don't suppose it particularly makes business sense for them to give us a smaller amount of money to pay back a loan which was earning them bigger interest at a lower interest rate. So you can, I suppose, understand that. But in recent years, that's essentially pretty much put the kibosh on us being able to reduce some of the older debt we've still got on the books, which is at a considerably higher rate. The other area that I have to take you through is in section 6.5, which is treatment of the minimum revenue provision. You may well remember that about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was probably now, we changed the methodology. There are a number of methodologies that we can utilize to the asset life method. And that was made a significant financial saving to us in the year that we made that transition. And the recommendation is that we retain that methodology. Apart from that, the report in terms of governance, it comes here on an annual basis, but corporate governance is the committee that's charged with overseeing Treasury management. They're the lucky people. I've already bored once with this, so they're getting the second bite of the cherry. And you know, when we took it to them a few weeks ago, they were happy with that, which is why it's before you in this format. But they oversee it on a regular basis, and they also undertake training ongoing in terms of that. And this is also a very one area where we can have a total conversation almost using acronyms. So there's a considerable glossary attached to this document, because there's a lot of technical terms and a lot of acronyms that are used within the report. So hopefully being able to pick those out of that. Annex A to the report is the prudential indicators primarily. As I say, the ones that members have historically tended to focus on are the capital ones, and those are now we've covered in the last report. But section 2 there may be of interest to members in terms of the maturity structure of our loans. So it shows roughly what percentage of our debt expires when. And obviously it's part of Steve's team's job in conjunction with our external advisors, Arling Close, to ensure that we don't have a situation where we have any individual year or run of years where we have to pay back significant amounts. So it's the way that we actually stagger those repayments. I think that's probably all I wanted to say on this paper. Probably too much, some of you will say, but I think it is important that the full council be aware. It is an important function of what goes on. So I'll ask Steve to pick up any of the technical issues I may have either got wrong or missed out on.
Steve?
Yeah, as usual, nothing really missed from Julian. I think the only thing I would say about this financial year, it's been it's need a lot more management, and that's largely to do with these big grant streams that we've been administering on behalf of Welsh Government that we've quite often had to turn around quite quickly. So we have had to go to the market and make sure we've got the funding available for, you know, millions of pounds being paid out on a Friday sort of thing. So we have had to do sort of more work this year, or more sort of work that needs a quick turnaround, let's put it that way. Yeah, there's nothing else really to mention. I think Julian's taken you through the report. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Steve. Diolch yn fawr. Un cwestiwn bach os gai, Julian. Da chi wedi tynnu sylw, dyma ma tudalen 215 ydy o'n y Saesneg. Yr benthygiadau ar ei fyny, a wedyn o danodd mae'r buddsoddiadau ar ei lawr. Ydy hynny'n beth iach, neu ydy'n amser i ni beidio benthyg chwaneg neu rhagor? Be ydych chi'n feddwl?
Okay, that's a perfectly legitimate question, one we normally get at this sort of time, and it does overlap with the last report as well in terms of the capital indicators and the ratio of our borrowing costs. I suppose that's the issue at the moment. To be fair, even though our borrowing, as you can see, has increased gradually over the years, generally the percentages, give or take, been round about the 7%. On the general account, in terms of the percentage that we actually use to service that debt. Now, of course, as individuals, we probably all have our own individual idea of what we believe is the right level of risk to take in any given set of circumstances. Certainly, from my perspective, where we are at the moment, you know, is a perfectly reasonable position for us to take, and it can probably increase a little bit more from there. Certainly, if we were starting to get above 10%, then I think of our revenue being used to fund budgets, I think that would be a situation where we would need to be reassessing it, or when we're getting close to that sort of level. As you say, it's not particularly healthy that our investment balances have dropped off a cliff. I don't see that's going to change anytime anytime really, probably. Not that I've got any magic glasses to see into the future. But I mean, I can remember when I was first making these reports, we used to be getting in excess of £2 million of investment income a year. It's a few, 100,000 now if we're lucky, sort of in a year. So that has obviously had a significant issue to us. We do tend to have less money. We went through a phase where we had some resource ourselves that we were holding. So rather than borrow it, we essentially borrowed off ourselves. That situation is no longer the case, as Steve has said. We are a borrowing authority, so when we need it for something, we essentially have to borrow it. At some point, we will. It's how long's a piece of string, I suppose, and it will be different for all of us, I suppose, as to how we assess that. But essentially, we talked about the capital projects and wanting to do more on highways and do more on various. We did the environmental issues earlier. It all has to come from somewhere. The pot is essentially finite. In terms of capital, we realistically only have 3 areas where we can get capital from. That's either external grants, which obviously we always seek to maximise wherever possible, from capital disposals. We're not an asset-rich authority in terms of lots of brownfield land that we can sell off for housing or anything like that, like some authorities are. Most of the assets we have, we use operationally. And then the only other source available to us is, in reality, is prudential borrowing. Some schemes are self-funding, so if you can make a business, we have a business case that says we'll save 100,000 of revenue by doing this, then that can be used to fund the prudential borrowing. But a lot of the prudential borrowing is unsupported and therefore has to be supported from the revenue budget. Sorry, I know this is a bit of a long-winded answer to what you said.
Julian.
But essentially, going forward, we have to balance up. Do we do this, or do we not do any more capital projects at some point? I suppose is the short answer.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Wel, dwi'n meddwl bod yna gwestiynau.
Sorry, you asked that question now, aren't you?
Mae'n iawn. Dwi'n meddwl bod yna gwestiynau. Oh, Martin, diolch yn mewn.
I'm really disappointed. Yeah.
Holland, diolch yn mewn.
Julian, I didn't want you to be disappointed, so just to be fair, to say that obviously we in corporate governance have already looked at these figures, as we have looked at other reports that have been presented today. But there's this old adage is when interest rates are low, it's good for borrowers, but it's not good news for investors. And that's the situation we're in at the moment. So if you are going to borrow money certainly over a fixed term at a very low interest rate, then this is the time to do it. But our job as corporate governance is to make sure that ratio, the borrowing ratio, is not breached, and to ensure that we're within our limits. But can I just bring you back to page 226, Julian, which shows us the types of borrowing and the time scales that borrowing is over. And the biggest group, 67.52% actual, is 10 years and above. How much of that is historic that we inherited? Because I know that we inherited amounts of cash from, was it RHAGLEN, council at the time, district council or whatever they were. And a lot of that money was invested at high rates of interest over fixed term over a long time. And we still cannot get rid of that, can we?
Julian?
Okay, I'm definitely going to ask Steve to come in on the more specific elements. But yes, just on the general point there. I mean, obviously we don't break it down once it goes above 10 years, because as we get nearer to the 10 years, then we will try and reprofile the debt as I say, to avoid anything falling too much falling due in 1 year. Certainly, I know that we had some very long-standing, like 50-year borrowing that was taken out, probably by, if not the former Clwyd, but I think there's some even goes back to the former Flintshire days. They were that ancient. I don't know. I think some of those have probably fallen off by now. But yes, as a general point, you are quite correct that there are still some fairly long-standing loans at considerably higher rates of interest than the ones that we've been taking out in the last 5 or 10 years. But Steve, I'm sure, will be able to give a bit more detail on that.
Diolch yn fawr, Steve.
I think it's quite difficult to answer. I want to switch my video because obviously once you reprofile a debt, what was the so for example, if you wrap up 10 different loans into a new loan, well, that loan was taken out during the last 5 years. So is it classed as the previous debt, or is it not? So I think the last time I looked, it was about 10 million was still quite high, and I'm talking high as in between 5 and 10% interest rates, but there is not much left, to be honest. We have managed to reprofile or paid off most of it.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch Martin, diolch am hwnna. Os oes yna neb arall, na I ofyn I Julian gynnig yr argymhellion. Diolch yn fawr, Julian.
I will do in 1 second, Chair. I've just got to scroll back up on my paper. Sorry, there we go. Right, so 3.1, the Council approves the Treasury Management Strategy Statement for 2021-22 as contained in Appendix 1. 3.2, the Council approves the setting of prudential indicators for 2021-22, 22-23 and 23-24 as Appendix 1, Annex A. 3.3, the Council approves the minimum revenue provision statement, Appendix 1, Section 6. And 3.4, the Council confirms it's read, understood and taken account of the wellbeing impact assessment in Appendix 2 as part of its consideration. Again, I'll move all those on block, Chair.
Mae Jeanette wedi eilio. Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones. Felly, yna I gychwyn eto yn y gorff diwedd. Rwy'n yn erbyn? Nag oes. Unrhyw yn ymatal? Nag oes. Felly, dwi'n siŵr bod ni gyd yn cydweld. Dwi'n jyst ddangos hynny, gorau medrwch chi. Dyna ni. Diolch yn fawr. A dwi'n falch wan o wedi troi at Gary Williams, sy'n mynd I wneud rhif 10 yn ei. Diolch, Gary.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Members will see the County Council Forward Work Programme, which is quite bare at the moment, actually, and needs to be populated. The next full council meeting is scheduled for the 13th of April, and we'll be having the usual report there relating to the arrangements for the election of Chair and Vice Chair. So we'll be seeking from group leaders nominations for the role of Vice Chair for the coming year. As members are aware, under the emergency coronavirus legislation, we were allowed to roll forward the terms of office of the Chair and Vice Chair from last May, but we do have to appoint or elect a Chair this coming May. And then at the annual council, there will be a number of reports that should be in the forward work programme there, but are not at present. I'll chase that up. So that's it, Chair, unless there are any questions.
Diolch yn fawr. Na, diolch yn fawr. Os yna rwy'n yn cynnig bod ni'n derbyn? Yr rhaglen fel diolch yn fawr, Ann Davies a Peter Scott yn eilio. Diolch yn fawr. A nhw'n I gyd-weld, dwi'n siŵr, ar hwnna. Ga I ddiolch I chi am eich amynedd. Mae wedi bod yn amser hir, dwi'n gwybod, ond ga I ddiolch I chi am fod mor amyneddgar efo fi. Cadwch yn ddiogel, a ga I ddiolch I swyddogion hefyd, ac I Sandra Williams, y cyfieithydd, am ei gwaith drwy'r adeg, a di ddim yn hawl, cofiwch, dwi wrthi parablu fa ma'n Gymraeg, a mae'n gwneud gwaith ardderchol. Diolch yn fawr chi, Sandra. A diolch I chi gyd. Hwyl fawr.
Ai.